Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into something a little grim, a little quiet, and oddly comforting if you've got the right kind of mind. You're standing barefoot on cold planks. The morning mist clings to your sleeves like nervous sweat. Outside your crooked little cottage, a rooster's call gets cut short by a faraway shout. Not unusual. You're the medieval town executioner, after all. Your name doesn't matter, most folks avoid saying it anyway, but they all know you, or think they do. You probably won't survive this job, not because someone's coming for you though that's always on the table, but because this life chips away at a person swing by swing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time below. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun, not because you're disciplined, but because sleep doesn't come easy anymore. The dreams aren't nightmares exactly, they're just busy. Crowds with no faces. Ropes tightening around wrists you've never seen. A creak of wood as if someone just sat on the edge of your bed. But it's morning now, so you get up. You always do. The thatch roof drips occasionally. Condensation or a leak, it's hard to tell and harder to care. Your boots are stiff. You tug them on anyway. Your fingers sting from the cold, and there's already a knot forming in your lower back. You were supposed to get a new mattress stuffing last month. You didn't. Too many other things like the gallows frame that's starting to splinter. Outside, dawn breathes fog across the cobblestones. You don't need a rooster to tell you it's early. You can hear the baker's lad coughing as he hauls firewood down the lane. Two dogs fight over something near the well. Probably a chicken neck. Or not a chicken. You learned long ago not to check. There's a pail by your door, half frozen. You break the ice with the flat of your palm and splash your face. This is the closest thing to a bath you'll get today. You pat dry with a rag that smells faintly of lye and iron. Iron smells follow you everywhere. A rat scurries across your floorboards. You don't mind. He's been around all winter. You named him Gerard. You're not proud of that. You take a piece of hard bread and chew slowly. It's yesterday's loaf, or maybe last week's, you can't remember. The crust scrapes the roof of your mouth, but chewing makes it soft enough to swallow. The butter is gone. So is the beer. There's a weak ale in a clay cup on the table flat, and slightly sour. You sip it anyway. There's no point being sober and miserable. You glance at your tools. The axe hangs above the hearth, not because you're proud of it, but because it doesn't fit in the cupboard. A coil of rope rests in the corner. A leather apron stained dark in patches hangs from a rusty hook. The hood sits beside it, folded neatly. You always fold it. It's the one piece of dignity you still control. The town bell rings, once faint, lazy. That means the court clerk is up. He'll be expecting you at the holding house within the hour. You sigh and reach for your coat. Historians still argue whether executioners in your era were social outcasts or weirdly respected. Some were feared, yes, but others got perks-free meals, good pay, even land. You get a discount on turnips and a seat no one else touches at the tavern. Take from that what you will. You pass your neighbour's cottage. She's sweeping the stoop. Doesn't look up. Doesn't speak. Her little boy stares. You nod. He runs inside. You get that a lot. Some townsfolk whisper that your breath can sour milk. Others claim you sleep in the graveyard. You've leaned into it a bit, adds to the mystique. But really you just want to be left alone. The sun begins to climb barely warm through the morning haze. It paints the rooftops in a pale glow, softening the thatch and broken chimneys. You almost forget what you're walking toward. Almost. The courthouse has a back entrance. You always use it. The main door is for people with clean hands and clean reputations. Yours are neither. The guard doesn't meet your eyes, but he opens the door. Inside the holding room smells of hay sweat and last night's stew. You hear sniffling in the corner. A boy, maybe 16, chained to a post. He's the first on the list today. Theft. Second offence. Lost 3 fingers last time. Not your decision. You just carry it out. The magistrate sits at a high desk sipping warm cider. He nods without speaking, shuffling papers. You take the list. 3 names. 1 minor mutilation, 1 flogging, 1 execution. A woman this time. You read her name, then forget it instantly. Back outside the sun is a little higher. Your boots creak. You glance at the square in the distance where the gallows wait like a quiet animal. Still, still, still. For now, you sigh, roll your shoulders and walk back toward your cottage. There's prep work to do, steel to sharpen, nerves to deaden. Just another morning. You're back home now, though home is generous. The room feels colder than when you left, as if the ghosts of your tools have been pacing in your absence. You kick the door shut with the heel of your boot, less dramatic than it sounds. You just don't want to bend over again so soon. The hood comes first. It's more than just cloth. It's a symbol of veil between who you are and what you do. You lay it across the table, smoothing out the creases. It's a drab black, not theatrical, like in the plays, but dense and heavy. It still smells of last summer's heat, and your own breath sour with tension. Then the apron, leather thick enough to stop splinters, blood and questions. You tug it over your tunic and fasten it at the waist. The ties are stiff with dried sweat, and one of the loops is about ready to snap. You make a mental note to bribe the cobbler again. And finally the axe. It hangs on a pair of nails above the hearth. The blade gleams faintly in the grey light, seeping through your shutters. You lift it down, carefully, cradling the handle in both hands like a baby. The head is heavy-weighted, just right for the kind of quickness your employers expect. That quickness is a myth, of course. You know better. It's about alignment, not speed. You sit on a stool near the hearth and begin sharpening it. The whetstone sings in that dull, whispery way, like someone breathing through clenched teeth. Every stroke is the same. Back forth, back forth. You focus on the edge, watching it shimmer a little brighter with each pass. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners were trained formally or just thrown into the job. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle. Some lucky apprenticeship, maybe followed by a trial run involving a dead pig and a very stern priest. You learn by doing. And messing up. And pretending you didn't mess up. As you work, your eyes drift toward the small chest in the corner. That's where you keep the other tools. The lesser seen ones. Branding irons. Hooks. A dull knife for slicing ears, which always makes you feel vaguely like a butcher. Not that butchers have a better reputation. If anything, theirs is worse. People still eat animals. No one likes to think about what happens after a sentence is passed. Your shoulders ache. You stretch them slowly, trying not to groan. There's no gym in this town, no spa, no chiropractor. There's just manual labour and herbs, most of which smell like wet hay and don't work. You return the axe to your lap. Run a cloth over the edge. Check for nicks. There's one near the top, tiny, barely noticeable, but it catches the light. You file it down with the tip of the stone and make a note to swing with the lower half today. Outside, you hear footsteps crunching on frost. Then silence. Then footsteps again, this time retreating. Probably someone thought about knocking. Then remembered who lives here. You allow yourself half a smile. There's something odd about being feared, but never touched. Not in violence, just not at all. No handshakes, no slaps on the back, no shoulder bumps in passing. You haven't felt another person's skin in over a year, unless you count the condemned, and that's not the same. You set the axe aside and stand brushing off your knees. You check the oil level in the small lamp you'll take with you, later it's half full. Should be enough. The wind's picking up outside. You can hear it teasing the thatch. That means more smoke at the gallows, where someone always forgets to dampen the coals. You double check your pouch. It contains a few coppers, a single silver coin bribe from last month, and a cloth-wrapped bundle of mint leaves. You chew them between jobs, partly for the taste, mostly to mask the breath of your profession. The cloak goes on last. It's heavier than it looks. The hood falls forward easily, casting your face in shadow. You practice that look sometimes in your polished tankard. Menacing, but quiet. Calm, not angry. People fear anger, they respect stillness. There's a knock at the back window. That means your assistant is late. Again. You open the door instead. Sure enough, young Corwin is jogging up the path, out of breath boots muddy cloak, askew, like a toddler wearing his father's coat. He stops a few feet short of you, then shifts awkwardly from foot to foot. "Sorry, master," he says. "The tanner's goat was loose in the street." You just grunt and gesture him inside. He doesn't enter, of course. He never does. Too superstitious. Instead, he hands you the rope, spool you'd asked for fresh, coarse, still stinking of lime, and a folded parchment with today's list of materials. Gloves cloths a small bucket for water. You thank him softly. He nods, almost surprised you spoke. Then he backs away like he's leaving an altar. You watch him go. A good kid. Too gentle for this. You hope he runs away soon. Your axe rests by the door, now blade-oiled handle wrapped. The rope is slung over your shoulder. You take one last look around the room. The rat Gerard is curled in a corner. You nod at him because why not? And then you step back into the cold. The square is still quiet when you reach it, but the silence is already changing. The kind of stillness that isn't still, just slow, like a pot beginning to boil. Shopkeepers mumble greetings to each other as they set up their stalls. A man with a broom draws looping figure eights in the dirt, not because it helps, but because it gives him something to do that isn't looking at you. You walk at an unhurried pace. You always do. A too fast executioner draws attention. People think you're eager. People think you like it. You don't, of course, but neither do you dread it the way they hope you do. You've made your peace, more or less. You pass the blacksmith, who pretends to hammer something each time you go by. You've caught him doing it with a cold forge before. It's the performance that matters. Everyone needs a way to say, "I don't have time to notice you." The gallows stand at the far end of the square, tall and crooked, like a man with too many regrets. The wood is dark with age, the grain swollen from years of sun and snow, and things best not spoken aloud. There are 3 steps up to the platform, 4 if you count the cracked one which wobbles if you step on it wrong. You always skip that one, not for luck, just because it's annoying. Historians still argue whether execution platforms were permanent fixtures in medieval towns, or built fresh for each occasion. Here it's been there longer than the bakery. The gallows have become part of the architecture, like the clock tower or the rat problem. You climb slowly. 1, 2, skip the crack 4. The wood groans faintly under your weight. Not from decay, just recognition. You set the axe on the rail. It leans like it's already tired. From this height, the town feels farther away than it is. You can see the baker unloading bread rolls, the cooper swatting flies off a barrel, a pair of dogs circling something in an alley. Children aren't out yet. Parents know better. But they'll come once the crowd thickens enough to hide in. You reach into your pouch and pull out the mint leaves. You chew slowly. It doesn't help much today. There's a sourness in your throat that mint can't cover. The square starts to fill, not all at once, just a trickle. The two men arrive with their arms crossed, muttering to each other in that low town way. A woman with a scarf over her mouth stands alone, probably pretending she doesn't know where she is. A priest walks past without blessing anything. And then the cart arrives. It's not dramatic. 2 horses, 1 driver, 1 passenger. The condemned. She's not chained, but her wrists are bound with cloth. Not tightly. Symbolic mostly. She's older than you expected, mid-40s maybe. Her clothes are plain but clean. Her face is blank. That's the part that gets you. The driver pulls up near the scaffold and hops down. He doesn't look at you, just ties the horses to a post and walks off. You wonder not for the first time if they draw lots for that job, or if someone always volunteers. The woman steps down on her own. You meet her at the bottom of the stairs. She looks at you, and for a moment you almost speak. But what would you say, nice weather? Sorry, neither seems quite right. She climbs the stairs ahead of you. Doesn't skip the cracked one. The crowd thickens now. Word spreads fast. There's a rhythm to these things. No bells, no criers, just that strange ripple of attention. You spot the baker's apprentice in the back. He's grinning. You'll remember that face. You guide the woman to the centre of the platform. She says nothing. You nod slightly. She nods back. It's not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. You turn to face the crowd. No announcement, no speech. That's the magistrate's job, and he's not here yet. Late again. You adjust the hood on your cloak more for comfort than effect. There's a soft cough from somewhere. A baby cries. Someone whispers something in a language you don't recognise. The magistrate finally appears, flanked by 2 guards who try very hard not to make eye contact with you. He reads a short scroll. Theft, then arson, then something about heresy. You barely listen. The words blur together like bees buzzing at a window. The sentence is clear though. Death by blade. The woman doesn't flinch. She watches the square like she's scanning for someone who isn't there. You offer her the cloth blindfold. She refuses. That's her right. You check the block. Solid. Unbloodied for now. You turn to your tools. Axe already oiled. Edge already honed. You give the blade one last look, then lift it in both hands. There's a rhythm to this too. Stand. Align. Wait for the nod. But the nod doesn't come. The magistrate is speaking again. Something about leniency, about last-minute appeals. You glance toward the woman. She hasn't moved. The magistrate steps forward and whispers to you. Too late. You already raised the axe. Then he nods. You lower the blade. Not yet. He likes drama, apparently, likes to let the silence thicken before it breaks. You shift your stance. Grip tighter. This time he nods. You move, and everything slows. The air is thick. The wood beneath your boots feels like it's underwater. The axe arcs cleanly. You don't hear anything. You never do, not in the moment. The blade does what it was made to do. You exhale before the crowd inhales. There's always a pause. That long blink after the act. A space between cause and consequence. Then the murmurs start, and the square once still begins to move again. You stay on the platform longer than necessary. It's not for effect, it's for recalibration. The swing, the silence, the breath you didn't know you were holding. It all takes a toll. You set the axe down gently. The crowd has already begun to shift their attention, fraying like old cloth. There's a boy selling honeyed nuts just beyond the line of guards. He calls out his prices like it's market day. Somewhere someone is laughing too loudly. You scan the faces. You always do. It's not out of guilt, It's out of curiosity. Who came to see justice? Who came for spectacle? Who just didn't want to be home? You step down from the platform. 1, 2, skip the crack. 4. The wood doesn't creak this time. Maybe it's just decided to stop caring. Corwin meets you at the bottom. He's pale, holding a bucket that's sloshing more than it should. He offers it to you. You dip a rag and clean the blade in long, even strokes. The cloth darkens quickly. He doesn't watch. Historians still argue whether executioners were required to clean their own tools, or if an assistant did it. But assistants are squeamish, and your standards are higher than most. Plus, there's something meditative about it. Wiping the blade is like brushing your teeth. You do it so you can pretend tomorrow will be normal. You check the edge again, still sharp. You dry it on a corner of your apron and return it to its leather sheath. The rope goes back in the satchel. You give Corwin a nod. He looks like he might vomit, but gives you a half salute instead. Another, he asks. You glance at the parchment folded in your pocket. Yes, another. But it's the light one, the kind people forget before supper. You head back toward the courthouse. The square peels away behind you like a fog retreating from heat. You don't look back. You never do. Inside the holding house, the second prisoner is ready. He's seated on a stool, hands tied loosely. The guard nearby looks bored. He's been here for 20 years and hasn't seen a real uprising. Just petty thieves and drunkards. Today's offender is a merchant who tried to smuggle grain during ration week. A dumb move, not even malicious. You've seen worse. The punishment is public shame and removal of 2 fingers, index and middle. A clean cross-section. Enough to send a message, but not enough to ruin his life, just make it less convenient. The merchant looks up as you enter. His eyes widen. You can practically see the regret steaming off him. You set your pouch on the table, roll up your sleeves and check the smaller tools. Knife, cloth, vinegar. You don't bother with the branding iron this time. Not needed. The town already knows his name. The man mumbles something. Maybe a prayer. Maybe an apology. Maybe both. You don't respond. You're not a priest. Instead, you prepare the block. It's a smaller one, waist height. You check the grain of the wood for splinters, then lay out the cloth beside it. Right hand, you say softly. He obeys reluctantly. The guard looks away. You position the fingers. Measure once. Then again. He turns his head. You move quickly. The blade is small, just a knife, really, but it's sharp, and you know exactly where the joints are. The bones snap like twigs beneath the flesh, and the blood is brief. You wrap the hand, press a cloth into his palm, and nod to the guard. It's done. The man moans a little, not from pain, but from shame. You've heard the sound before. It's the kind of noise people make when they realise they'll be remembered for the wrong thing. You clean the knife, rinse your hands, and take a moment to breathe. Historians sometimes debate whether medieval punishments were meant to deter crime or just entertain the public. In practice, they did both. People learn faster when there's a body to point at, or a missing digit. You exit through the back again. It's quieter this time. The crowd's moved on, probably toward the tavern. Stories are already being told, exaggerated, twisted, turned into fables. You're not in any of them. You're a prop. You return to your cottage for a moment of peace. The axe goes back on its hook. The cloths are tossed into the wash basin. You pour yourself a cup of ale and sit by the window. Gerard the rat is nowhere to be seen, probably out gathering secrets. The mid-morning light is softer now, golden warm. It makes everything look less serious, even the stains on the floor. You glance at the schedule again. There's one more job before lunch. Then maybe some bread. If you're lucky, it won't be stale this time. For now, you close your eyes. Just for a moment. Not sleep. Just stillness. You've earned it, and anyway the hangman's widow is expecting you for dinner. She lives 3 lanes over, just past the tanner's yards, in a little timber-framed cottage with a sagging roof and a garden that somehow still grows thyme. Everyone calls her the widow, but her name is Elfrida. You suspect most people forgot that somewhere along the way. Her husband, your predecessor, died nearly 5 winters ago, throat opened in a tavern dispute that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with dice. You knock once and then enter, as is the quiet agreement between the two of you. She's ladling stew into a wooden bowl, her back-turned apron dusted with flour and ash. The room smells of onions, rosemary, and bread that might actually still be warm. "You're late," she says, not looking up. "You're early," you reply. She sets the bowl down and gestures to the stool near the hearth. You sit without removing your cloak. She doesn't ask questions about the woman, the merchant, or anything in between. That's part of her appeal. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners lived alone by choice or were forced into seclusion. But companionship, even grim and silent, has always been a rebellion against isolation. You and Elfrida are not lovers, not quite friends, more like 2 bookends on a very odd shelf. She breaks a roll in half and hands it to you. Steam escapes. It's soft. Real bread. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. "The baker owed me. He knows I know about the weevils." You grin just a little. The stew is thick, heavy with barley and root vegetables. You eat slowly, the kind of slow that isn't about savouring, but about making the moment last. There's no rush. There never is when you're with her. Gerard the rat lives here too, it turns out. Or his cousin does. A smaller rat with one ear who peeks out from beneath the cupboard. Elfrida throws him a crust. "Name that one Bishop," she mutters. He eats more than he blesses. You nearly choke on a laugh. The moment surprises you. She notices but says nothing. After you finish, she clears your bowl and pours you a cup of her famous widow's cordial, a brew of dried fruits, questionable herbs, and something that tastes suspiciously like boot polish. You sip it anyway. You glance at the fire. It's crackling softly, the kind of sound that could lull you to sleep if you weren't still wearing a hood stained with sweat and the weight of the morning. "More this afternoon?" she asks. One you answer. "Another woman." You nod. She sighs and begins washing the dishes. Her sleeves are rolled up, arms lined with the small scars of daily work. She never flinches at blood. She flinches at silence. "I knew her," I think she says finally. Or her brother. He used to sell pickled eels near the dock. You remember him vaguely. Big hands, laughed like a barking dog. "She steal something?" Elfrida asks. "Heresy," you answer. She snorts. So, breathing wrong, you finish your cordial and stand. Your cloak sways with the movement. She walks you to the door but doesn't open it. "You dreamed last night?" she asks. You pause. "Yes." "Same one." You nod. She presses a dried sprig of lavender into your hand. "Sleep with it. Won't help, but it'll make the sheets smell nice." You nod again. She opens the door. Outside, the sky has turned overcast, as if a blanket has been tugged halfway across the heavens. A crow watches you from a rooftop, cawing once, before turning its head in that unsettling, too smart way. You return home briefly to wash your hands and sharpen your smaller blade. The one for finishing things if needed. You hope you won't need it. You walk the length of the square again, less crowded now. Most people have eaten. Some have even forgotten what they saw this morning. Or pretended to. You meet the guards by the holding house. They escort you in, saying little. The woman this time is quiet. Late 20s maybe. Her hands are bound in front. She has a streak of dried blood near her hairline, but otherwise looks untouched. She meets your eyes, not defiantly, not pleading, just ready. You guide her gently, more gently than expected, to the cart. She steps up without help. The guards look relieved. One mutters something about lucky weather. You ignore him. Historians sometimes debate whether executioners treated female prisoners more gently. Some say yes. Others argue it was all performance. You know the answer is simpler. Women scream differently, and silence from them cuts deeper. You take your place beside her in the cart. The ride is slow. No one speaks. In the square, the crowd has reassembled. Of course they have. Second helpings of spectacle, like second helpings of stew, are hard to resist when the first was so satisfying. You climb the scaffold again. 1, 2, skip the crack. 4. She follows. This one asks for a prayer. You don't lead it, but you step back to allow it. A friar appears, murmuring low and fast, like he's late for a better sermon. The magistrate is absent this time. No speech, just a nod from the friar. She turns to you, eyes open, mouth closed. You ask if she wants the blindfold. She shakes her head. You position her hands, place a cloth beneath her knees, and step back. The axe feels heavier this time. Maybe it is. You raise it anyway, and swing. Not as clean this time. She moves at the last second, just slightly, enough that the blade doesn't land quite right. You don't react. You never do. The second strike is faster, not out of panic, out of mercy. It's done. You step back, let the guards handle the rest. The murmurs return. Someone coughs. A dog barks once, then falls silent. You descend. 1, 2, skip the crack. 4. Your hands are shaking now, just a little. Lunch is over. You don't go straight home, not yet. The day's not over, and there's one more part of the job people forget about the talking. Not to the crowd, not to the guards, and definitely not to the magistrate. No, this is the part where you speak to the condemned. Not in court, not on the scaffold, but in the dim little cell where they wait for their final sunrise. You've always found this part strange, not for what it is, but for how few people realise it happens. As if the condemned just blink into existence atop the platform, ready and resigned, but no. Most of them sit in damp corners shivering or singing or pacing holes into the floor. And sometimes they ask to see you. Not the priest, you. You're not sure why. Maybe it's morbid curiosity. Maybe it's the same instinct that makes people stare at lightning. This afternoon's visit is for a man scheduled tomorrow. You haven't met him yet. You take the alley behind the courthouse and descend into the jail. The guard at the stairs hands you a stub of tallow candle and gestures vaguely toward the far cell. He's been talkative, the man mutters. Too talkative. You nod and take the candle. The hall smells of mildew straw and rusted iron. You pass 3 empty cells before finding the one with a figure inside. Thin, alert, watching you already. Are you the axe, he asks. You nod. He smiles. Not kindly, but not cruelly either, just amused. I thought you'd be taller. You step closer. The candle flickers. His face is lined, but not old. He has the sort of face that's probably been in 100 crowds watching people like you. A veteran of witnessing. I requested you, he says. Don't know if that means anything. It does. More than you care to admit. He pats the straw beside him. You don't sit. Just lean against the wall arms, folded beneath the cloak. He doesn't seem to mind. He launches into his story without prompting. Something about forged coins, a jealous cousin, and a mule that definitely wasn't stolen, but somehow ended up in the bishop's garden. You catch only fragments, but that's fine. He's not telling it for the record. He's telling it because words are all he has left. Historians still debate how often executioners interacted with prisoners before their deaths. Some say never. Others suggest that in smaller towns, the executioner became a kind of unwilling confessor. You know the truth is simpler people talk to whoever listens, especially when they're scared. The man shifts onto his side. You nervous? You shake your head. He grins. Didn't think so. You've got the look. Like a butcher who feels bad, but not bad enough to stop. You let the silence hang. He squints. You ever get it wrong? You tilt your head. The swing he clarifies. Ever miss? You don't answer. He nods slowly. Thought so. He leans back, eyes flickering toward the ceiling. I had a wife once. She used to peel apples with her thumb, just the thumb. Drove me mad. Never wasted a scrap of skin. Wonder if she'll hear about this. You say nothing. The candle gutters. You check the time by instinct, not light. You going to do it quick, he asks. You nod. He closes his eyes. All right then. You step back from the bars. You've heard enough. So has he. As you pass the guard on your way out, he raises an eyebrow. Anything useful? No, you say. Just a story about apples. You exit into the early evening. The sky is the colour of old parchment, dim and streaked with pink. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Back at home, you light your own candle. Gerard scurries across the hearthstone chasing something invisible. You toss him a scrap of crust. He ignores it. You remove the axe from its hook, not to clean it this time, but just to hold it. The weight is familiar now, almost comforting. Like how some people cradle old books or worn tools. There's history in the steel. Your history. You remember your first job. You were younger then. Too confident. The man was twice your size and had to be forced down. You missed by inches. He screamed once and then never again. You didn't eat for 3 days. Now you eat stew with widows and listen to dying men talk about fruit. There's something noble in that, maybe. You pour a little ale into a cup. It's lukewarm. You drink anyway. Your hands are cleaner than they were this morning, but your nails still carry flecks of something you choose not to identify. You check tomorrow's list. Just the one. Then silence. Unless the magistrate decides to add someone. He's been known to do that after a few too many cups of clove wine. You sit at the window, watch the candle flicker. In the street below, a man stumbles home singing off-key. No one stops him. No one joins him. The sky darkens to slate. You wonder if the man in the cell will sleep. You wonder if you will. There's a knock at the door. You stiffen. Then you remember it's just Elfrida. She's brought you leftover pie. You open the door. She hands you the basket without a word, then vanishes into the night. You close the door and light another candle. There's a rhythm to corruption. It never knocks too hard, never shouts in the square. It slips quietly between the lines of official scrolls, wears clean boots, and usually smells faintly of rosewater and self-interest. This afternoon, corruption arrives, wearing a green velvet cloak and a signet ring shaped like a lion's paw. The man it's attached to stands at your doorway, with the exaggerated posture of someone who believes he is both important and invisible. You don't speak. Just raise an eyebrow and step aside. He enters like he's done it before, which, if you're being honest, he probably has. You don't recognise the face, but the performance is all too familiar. He sets a pouch on your table. It makes a sound you've come to recognise, soft coin and harder intent. Baron de Villon, he says, as if that should explain everything. You don't sit, neither does he. The man you're due to execute tomorrow, he continues, has enemies, but also friends, powerful ones. It would be beneficial if the act were handled with a little extra discretion. You let the silence stretch. He fills it as they always do. Specifically, we'd prefer no spectacle. No drawn crowds, no scaffold, something private, controlled. You glance at the pouch. Same time you ask. He nods. Just inside the east gate. There'll be a cart waiting. Quiet, swift, no witnesses. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly autonomous or deeply entangled in the politics of the court. You could settle that argument with one shrug. He sets a sealed envelope beside the pouch. In case of inquiry. You tap the wax seal with one finger. The lion's paw again. These people are nothing if not consistent. He leaves without waiting for confirmation. Just assumes the weight of the coin is enough to guarantee silence. And it is. Not because you're greedy, but because you understand the game. The moment the door closes, Gerard climbs onto the table and starts sniffing the pouch. You bat him away gently. You count the coins. 20 silver. More than most earn in 2 months. You've been paid to follow the law before. Today you're being paid to bend it slightly, not break it. Just angle it sideways so it's easier to walk through. You pocket the pouch and tuck the envelope under the floorboard beside the loose tile near the hearth. That tile knows more secrets than most priests. You clean your tools again, not because they're dirty, but because you need something to do with your hands. Your fingers twitch slightly from the tension of keeping them still. You run a cloth over the axe head and think about discretion. You know what he really meant. No public, no priest, no story. The man in the cell will vanish like smoke. And that's fine, you're not paid to ask questions. You've seen this before. A noble's illegitimate son, a cousin with too many debts. A rival who knows where the skeletons are buried, figuratively or literally. Everyone wants clean hands. No one wants to hold the soap. That night, you sit in candlelight and eat Elfrida's pie. It's filled with leeks and soft cheese, the crust slightly burned. Perfect. She knows you too well. You scribble a few lines into your ledger. Not names, never names. Just symbols. 2 lines for a swing. A curl for coin. A cross for discretion. You've been keeping these marks for years, no one else can read them. You sometimes forget what they mean yourself. Sleep doesn't come quickly. You lie on your side facing the window. The moon is low and buttery, caught in a net of branches. You trace the cracks in your ceiling with your eyes. They've shifted slightly since last winter. You dream again. Not of the condemned this time, but of the crowd. Their eyes are all mouths. They chant your name, but it isn't your name. It's the name of the axe. You can't speak. Your tongue is tied with red ribbon. You try to scream, and the sound is a bell tolling over and over. You wake before dawn, heart thudding. Gerard watches you from the mantel. You nod at him. He doesn't blink. You rise, wash and dress in near silence. No hood today. No cloak. You wear only a dark tunic and plain trousers, the kind a labourer might wear. No one notices men in simple clothes. The east gate smells of damp earth and horses. The cart is waiting as promised. 2 guards, mercenaries, judging by their armour, stand beside it, faces blank as eggs. You nod once. They open the back. The man inside is bound, but not gagged. He looks up as you approach. It's the same man from the cell, of course, but somehow smaller now, not physically, just condensed. As if resignation has made his bones fold inward. He smiles again, still amused. Did they pay you extra, he asks. You nod. He chuckles. Glad to know I'm worth something. The mercenaries step aside. You climb in. The cart starts moving. No drum roll. No crowd, no applause, just the clatter of wooden wheels and the muffled sound of hooves on packed dirt. You perform the act inside the cart. It's messier than usual. The angle is wrong. You brace against the side and swing as cleanly as you can. He doesn't make a sound, not even at the end. You leave the body with the guards. They'll say he died of fever, or ran off, or never existed. That's not your concern. You return home with clean hands and heavy shoulders. No one greets you on the street. You like it better that way. The platform creaks beneath your boots again. Same wood, same height, same steps, 1, 2, skip the crack, 4. But everything feels off. Not because of what you've done, but because today you're doing it in the daylight, in front of everyone, again. This morning's job is official. Public. A return to routine. That quiet, miserable pageantry they've come to expect. You sharpened the axe last night, as always. You burned a sprig of dried lavender, not for luck, but because the cell smelled like urine and fear. It clung to your cloak. Still does. Today's condemned is a man accused of treason, though judging by the crowd's reaction, he's more folk hero than villain. A blacksmith from the edge of town, accused of forging weapons for a rebellious faction. You don't know the details. You're not meant to. You only know what's printed in the magistrate's neat calligraphy on the official order now rolled and damp in your pocket. Historians still argue whether these crowd trials were more about punishment or politics. Some say the public demanded blood. Others suggest the ruling class simply understood the power of performance. You know a stage when you see one. The man is brought forward with a soldier on either side, his hands bound with thick rope ankles dragging slightly. His face is bruised, but he holds his head high. You hate that, not because it bothers you morally, but because it makes everything harder. It invites the crowd to care. That's not part of your job, but it bleeds into the edges all the same. You watch as the magistrate climbs the platform faster than usual, his robes flapping like they want to leave him behind. He raises a hand. The crowd hushes. He recites the charges. He loves this part. You can tell by the way his voice thickens on the phrases betrayal of the crown and undermining public order. You wonder if he practices in front of a mirror. The accused doesn't speak, doesn't plead, just looks past the crowd as though watching a storm roll in. The magistrate concludes with a dramatic gesture, then steps aside, letting his robes billow one final time for emphasis. You wait until the hush returns, and then you approach the condemned. Do you want the cloth, you ask, quiet enough that only he hears? He snorts softly. What's the point? You nod. The block is already set. You guide him gently. His knees touch the wood, but he doesn't flinch. You can feel the energy of the crowd behind you buzzing like a fly caught between glass panes. Someone coughs. Someone else spits. You can smell onions and sweat, and something too metallic to name. You position yourself. The axe feels familiar in your grip, almost neutral. You raise it, and the drums start late. Again, this always happens when young Thomas is on duty. He never watches your signals, probably daydreaming about buttered turnips again. You sigh under your hood. You wait half a beat, 2 beats, then swing. It's clean, very clean, so clean it's almost boring. The body slumps forward, the head rolling slightly, then settling like it's decided to take a nap. You step back. The crowd reacts. Applause from one corner, silence from another. Someone gasps. A woman cries out in a voice that sounds more angry than sad. Then, as always, the moment passes. People begin to leave, slowly like a tide slipping back out to sea. The magistrate gives you a small nod, the kind that says, "Well done, but let's not talk about it." You descend. 1, 2, skip the crack 4. Corwin meets you below, holding a cloth and looking pale again. You wipe the blade, hand it back, and take a long breath. "You all right?" he asks, Fine you lie, because you are, mostly. You walk the long way home, past the fishmonger's stall where eels writhe in a basket, past the shoemaker's bench where tiny nails catch the sunlight like flecks of silver, past the church where the bell hasn't rung in 3 days because the rope snapped and no one wants to climb up there. You hear children playing in an alley, one pretending to be a knight, the other pretending to be you. You pause. Whack. The smaller one shouts, mimicking a swing with a stick. The other kid falls theatrically clutching his neck. Both laugh. You keep walking. Back at the cottage, Gerard is curled beside the hearth like a particularly judgmental potato. You toss him a piece of crust. He ignores it. Again. You remove the cloak, hang it on its usual peg. You don't clean the axe right away. You don't light a candle. You just sit. Elbows on knees, palms against your face. You think about the man's last words, or lack thereof. Sometimes the silence is louder than screams. You rise, walk to the window, and open it. The air outside is warmer than expected. It smells like dust lilacs and something baking too long. You stare into the sky. The clouds move lazily. You envy them. Corwin knocks. You knew he would. Another name, he says, holding out a scrap of parchment. Of course. You take it, unfold it. Just a time and a place. Nothing else. You nod. He leaves. And you sharpen the blade again. You arrive early this time, not because you need to, but because you can't sit still. The square is still half asleep, shadows stretched long, like limbs not yet shaken from dreams. A few stalls are setting up. The air smells of wet earth and yesterday's turnip broth. You mount the scaffold without your tools, just your boots and your hood. You run your hand along the rail. The wood is familiar now, like a railing at home, worn smooth by repetition and salt. You can feel the history in the grooves, the little chips, where someone's ring scraped in panic, the dark stains that never quite wash out. Corwin's late again. Probably tangled up in some alley dispute, or hiding behind the tanner's shop to avoid making eye contact with the condemned. You don't blame him. You were him once. You sit on the edge of the platform legs, dangling over the side. From here the square looks almost peaceful, like a village painting where someone forgot to add the screaming. The stillness is short-lived. The drummer arrives next a sullen boy named Thomas, whose timing, as you well know, is criminally unreliable. He nods at you and begins setting up tapping the drum absently like it might bite him. Soon after the cart appears. Drawn by a single horse, driven by a man who looks half asleep, it creaks into the square with all the subtlety of a bad omen. The condemned sits in the back, chained but upright eyes fixed on the horizon like he's expecting someone to run in and stop all this. No one does. Today's man is a miller, accused of poisoning a nobleman's grain shipment. Could be true. Could be a convenient story. Historians still argue whether false charges were common in medieval towns, but you've seen enough to know when the facts feel too tidy. He looks ordinary, which is the unsettling part. A little soft in the face, thick hands a scar above one eyebrow that suggests an old accident rather than war. You've seen him before at market maybe, buying onions. He stumbles as he's helped off the cart. You move forward, meet him at the stairs. I have children, he whispers. You pause. I have a job, you reply, voice low and level. You guide him up the steps. He doesn't resist. He's trembling, but walking. 1, 2, skip the crack, 4. The block is in place. You check it with your boot steady. You unwrap the cloth and lay it beside it. The blade is already near the rail, covered in linen, waiting for its brief moment of theatre. The magistrate is here again, trailing perfume and sweat. He raises the scroll, begins reading. You half listen. Something about betrayal. Contaminated flour. An entire household struck with illness. You watch the man's face. He's listening, but only just. Eyes darting. Breathing shallow. He starts mouthing names probably his children's. You offer the blindfold. He takes it. You tie it, gently adjusting so it won't slip. These are the small things you can still control. You guide him to his knees. He hesitates, then goes limp, like a sack of grain. You raise the axe. Thomas waits too long. Again. You don't. The swing is heavy exact. The thud is duller than usual. The wood beneath must be soaked. The crowd exhales. There's a delay in response. Then the murmurs rise. A woman crosses herself. A boy winces. Someone claps once, then stops. You clean the blade with a cloth before descending. 1, 2, skip the crack 4. Corwin finally appears sweating and breathless, holding the water pail you requested 2 hours ago. You say nothing. Just hand him the cloth, and he gets to work. The magistrate approaches you, fiddling with a ring on his finger. Well done, he mutters. Very efficient. You nod, then walk away. You pass the same children from before, only now they're quiet, pressed against their mother's skirts. You return home without incident. No Elfrida today, no pie, just the sound of the shutters rattling in the breeze. You sit by the hearth. The embers are low. You toss in a piece of kindling more out of habit than need. Gerard is nowhere to be seen. You think about the miller's last words, not poetic, not brave, just factual. I have children. You wonder if they were in the crowd. You hope not. You really truly hope not. You spend the afternoon oiling your tools. Not just the axe, but everything ropes clamps the small blade you keep hidden in the drawer wrapped in wool. You check the ledger. Another mark. 1 swing, 1 cloth, 1 refusal. There's a knock on the door. You freeze. It's not Corwin. He never knocks. You open it to find a boy, maybe 12, holding a small bundle of dried flowers. He doesn't say anything, just holds them out. You take them. He runs. You close the door and sit back down, the flowers still in your hand. They smell faintly of meadow and dirt. Mostly dirt. You don't know what they mean, but you place them gently by the axe. Even after all this time, there's a moment brief and quiet between blade and blood where everything stops. You've begun to notice it more, not because it's growing, but because it's holding still. That stillness is starting to feel like the real work. You sit at your table with a spoon in one hand and a cold bowl of lentils in the other, watching the candle burn slowly down. The lentils aren't bad, they're just uninspired, like the rest of your day. There was no execution today, no sentence, no visit, just a knock in the morning from the bailiff to say nothing on the list. He handed you a small roll of bread out of habit, then walked away before you could thank him. It should be a relief, but you feel off balance without a schedule, like a pendulum mid-swing. You spent most of the day walking, out past the walls along the edge of the woods where the grass grows long and unbothered. You passed a shepherd with 3 sheep and a flute he clearly doesn't know how to play. You nodded. He nodded. Neither of you stopped walking. You returned before dark, not because you had to, but because the cottage has become your compass. It's where you always end up. Historians still argue whether executioners were allowed to own land or live within town walls. It likely depended on the town. Here you get a plot, a roof, and the comfort of everyone else keeping their distance. You light another candle and sharpen the axe again, not because it needs it, but because you do. The whetstone slides, sings, stops. Again, again. The ritual is quiet, even meditative. You remember your father's hands doing the same motion, except it wasn't for an axe. It was a plough blade. Different shape, same edge, same patience. He never knew what you became. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's why he stopped writing. There's a scratching sound. You glance toward the hearth. Gerard has returned triumphant, dragging what looks like a piece of onion skin in his tiny jaws. You chuckle softly and toss him a crumb from your roll. He inspects it, then ignores it, as always. The night stretches long. You sit by the fire reading an old letter. Not addressed to you, not anymore. It's from a woman named Adela. You knew her once. She had hands like pottery, warm, slightly rough, always shaping something. She made you a cup once. You still drink from it when the metal ones feel too cold. The letter is short, just a few lines about rain and how the chickens finally started laying again. It ends with stay warm and nothing else. You did, mostly. You tuck the letter back into the drawer. It's between the coin pouch and the cloth used for blindfolds. You glance toward the ledger again. It sits open empty of new marks. A blank day. A gift. Maybe. Or maybe it's just an unpaid hour. You step outside. The sky is milk dark, thick with stars. The moon hangs low, a gentle scythe over the rooftops. You breathe in slowly, the air cool and wet. You hear footsteps behind you. Not sneaking, just hesitant. It's Corwin. He approaches holding something wrapped in oilcloth. He looks nervous. You dropped this, he says, holding it out. It's your sharpening stone. You didn't even realise it was gone. You nod and take it. Thought you might want it back, he adds. Didn't want you to think I stole it. I don't think that you say gently. He shifts on his feet. You ever get tired of it? You pause. Of what? He shrugs, embarrassed. You know. You do know, sometimes you say. Mostly when the drums are late, he smiles at that. A real one. Then, do you think I could ever do what you do? You look at him. Really look. He's young, clumsy too, soft in the eyes. But he's also curious, attentive, and just the right kind of strange. Only if you don't want to, you say. He doesn't understand now. Maybe he will. He nods, thanks you, and walks off into the mist. You stand there a moment longer. The night wraps itself around your shoulders. You close the door behind you. You return the sharpening stone to its place. You stoke the fire. You hang the hood. You sit, not waiting, just being. The axe rests by the hearth, silent, polished, ready. You don't touch it. Not tonight. You spend the next morning in ink. Not blood, not sweat. Ink. Thick, scratchy, foul-smelling ink that stains your fingernails and turns the tips of your fingers an odd purplish black. The magistrate has requested updated executive ledgers, which is a very formal way of saying, we need to make sure we're not forgetting who died. You pull the large book from its shelf, its spine cracked and flaking like old bread. Inside are rows of tidy boxes drawn by someone with far more patience than sense. Name date, crime sentence, method, final words. Only half the boxes ever get filled. You dip the quill and begin. Unidentified woman. Date 4 days ago. Crime heresy. Sentence death by axe. Final words refused cloth. No final statement. You pause. You think about her again. The way she looked at you. The way she didn't flinch. You move on. Next line Miller. Date yesterday. Crime treason alleged. Sentence death by axe. Final words. I have children. That one stays with you. Historians still argue whether execution records were actually accurate. You've seen both sides. Some entries are detailed with footnotes and margin scrawls. Others simply say, guilty, died. You wonder how many more names have been lost to time, or just misspelled beyond recognition. Your hand cramps by mid-morning. You set the quill down and stretch your fingers. The ink pot nearly spills caught just in time by the tip of your sleeve. You sigh. You miss the predictability of steel. There's something strange about writing death into boxes. It flattens the noise. It compresses a moment, crowd shouts breathblade into a single line, like trying to trap a storm in a bottle. Corwin knocks, then lets himself in. "I brought more paper," he announces, placing a small bundle on the table. "Also, bread, kind of." He unwraps a loaf that's already missing one corner. "Bit stale," he admits. You break off a piece and chew slowly. He sits across from you, glancing at the open ledger. "Is that all of them?" he asks, nodding toward the book. "Just the last 2 months." He whistles low. "That many?" You nod. He grows quiet. You both stare at the page for a while. The letters don't change, but somehow they feel heavier the longer you look. "Do you remember all their faces?" he asks. You don't answer. Because the truth is not all of them. Some blur together. Some stand out. Some return in dreams wearing someone else's voice. You close the book and push it aside. Corwin takes the hint and shifts to another topic. "Elfrida said you left pie on her doorstep. You didn't write." You shake your head. He frowns. "Weird. She says it was definitely yours." You both look at the rat, who has taken up residence atop the stool like a furry little critic. Gerard Corwin asks. You shrug. Stranger things have happened. Later that afternoon, you're called to the magistrate's office. Not the holding cell, not the platform, his office. That's never good. You knock twice and enter. He's seated behind a desk that looks too large for him, shuffling scrolls as if they're alive. He doesn't look up. Another noble family is requesting a special arrangement, he says. Of course. Privacy, you ask. Speed, he replies. He passes you a note. The name isn't familiar, but the seal is. Same lion's paw, different envelope. Tomorrow evening, he says. Behind the granary. No need for guards. You nod, but your stomach twists slightly. That much privacy always means one of two things: someone very powerful, or someone very inconvenient. You take the note and return home. There's an unease in your fingertips, the kind that doesn't fade with food or fire. You eat a small dinner, mostly root vegetables and leftover broth. Gerard sniffs at it, then turns away in dramatic disgust. You clean your tools. Again, this time slower, with care. You oil the handle of the axe until it gleams like a well-fed cat. You run your fingers along the edge and find a new chip, tiny near the heel. You file it out. You wash your hands. The ink from the morning is still clinging to the lines in your skin. You scrub harder than usual. By candlelight you read from a book Elfrida once gave you. It's not about law or justice. It's about herbs. Each page is a little poem about roots and flowers and leaves, with names too pretty for what they actually do. You find a section on lavender. Repels moths, calms the nerves, keeps away grief. You tear the page out and place it beneath your pillow. You dream that night of rain, not storms, just steady, soft rain over a roof that doesn't leak. You dream of washing the axe in a river so clear you can see fish beneath it watching you with round, glassy eyes. You wake just before sunrise. Your pillow smells faintly of crushed leaves and ink. The granary always smells of rot and barley, a combination that sticks in your nose long after you leave. It's tucked near the edge of town, beside the shallow stream where tanners sometimes dump their wastewater. At night, it's worse. The grain dust clings to the mist and makes everything feel damp and slightly sour. You arrive early. You always do when things feel off. The sky is still the blue of bruised porcelain. No one's about. Even the dogs keep their distance. You check the spot mentioned in the note. It's behind the third building, near the collapsed millstone that no one's bothered to move in 5 years. There's already a cart waiting, covered, quiet, unattended. You recognise the horse. It belongs to the courier service used by the local garrison. That confirms it's someone military. Or someone who wants you to think they are. You wait. You don't sit. You don't lean. You simply stand axe in hand, hood down, face unreadable. Eventually, a figure appears, cloaked, gloved, face obscured. He leads the condemned, small frame, slumped, shackled at the wrists and ankles. As they get closer, your heart kicks once in your chest. It's a boy, not a child, not a man. Somewhere in that awkward space where a voice can still crack mid-curse. The cloaked figure says nothing, just hands you a folded scroll. You open it. The seal breaks cleanly. The letter is short. Condemned Squire Tom de Greer. Charges treason. Orders immediate disposal. No record. You look up. The boy is looking at the ground. Shoulders hunched, mouth set. The figure leaves without a word. Historians still argue whether records were sometimes destroyed on purpose or simply lost. You hold in your hands proof of the former. You want to ask questions. Who was he? What did he know? Who wanted him forgotten? But the boy speaks before you can. Is it true you don't feel anything? You blink. He looks up. His eyes are brown and bloodshot, and he looks more exhausted than afraid. I mean, he adds, that's what they say. You consider it. I feel everything you say, just slower. He nods like he expected that. You undo the cloth on his wrists yourself. He winces, but says nothing. He doesn't ask for a blindfold. You don't offer. There's no block, no scaffold. Just the grass, the wet dirt, and your own quiet rituals. He kneels. You raise the axe. He whispers something soft, almost inaudible. Not a prayer. A name, maybe. A place. You swing, the blade lands true. But there's something different this time. Something quieter. Not from the boy. From you. When it's over, you place a hand on the back of his cloak. Just for a moment. You don't know why. You clean the axe in the stream behind the granary. The water is cold, but the current is gentle. The blade looks darker than usual in the twilight. You wrap it carefully and return home. There's no bread left. You boil oats, instead eat them slowly by the fire. Corwin knocks, then opens the door. He looks pale. They say there was a boy, he says. You nod. They say he didn't do anything wrong. You stir your oats. They always say that. He doesn't leave. He stares at you. His eyes are angry. Not just sad angry. I'd want to know, he says, if it were me. You set the bowl aside. You wouldn't, you say. He leaves. The door shuts harder than usual. You sit in silence. The fire crackles, then dies down to orange hums. Gerard doesn't come out. Even he knows tonight is too heavy for crumbs. You pick up the axe and polish the handle. Not the blade. Not tonight. You think of the name the boy whispered. You'll never know what it meant. You don't write it down. But it stays. Long after the fire is ash. Evening creeps in with the kind of cold that bites through your sleeves and settles into your elbows. You light 2 candles tonight just to keep the shadows from pressing too close. They flicker unevenly. One tilts to the left like it's trying to escape the room entirely. You sit by the hearth, not touching your food, not touching your tools, just sitting. Elfrida arrives without knocking. She carries a pot wrapped in linen and a look that says she's already made up her mind. You open the door, step aside, and she enters like she's done it every evening for the past 10 years, which she hasn't, but it feels that way now. She sets the pot on the table. Stew, she says. Too much sage. Don't complain. You don't. She ladles it into a bowl, hands it to you, and sits across the table like it's her kitchen, and you're just borrowing it for the season. You eat. It's too much sage, but it's warm. Corwin came to see me, she says. You glance up. Her face is calm, unreadable even by your standards. He's upset. You nod. Good, she says. You blink. Means he still has a line, she adds. A sense of where the bottom is. You stare into the bowl. He wants to quit, you murmur. He won't, she replies, not unless you tell him to. She refills your bowl before you can finish the first. Elfrida, you say, have you ever buried anyone without telling anyone? She doesn't answer right away, just watches the candle flame tilt and correct itself. Yes, she says at last. But not like you mean. You nod. There's a long silence, filled only by the sound of spoons tapping ceramic, and the occasional crack from the fire. Outside, the wind pushes against the shutters, like a drunk looking for the right house. Tomorrow, she says, I want you to come to my garden. You raise an eyebrow. I've got a corner for lavender, she explains. Needs pruning. You blink. That's not a metaphor, she adds. You nod. Good, she says. We'll keep it that way. She leaves after wiping the table clean and giving Gerard a suspicious glance. He doesn't blink, just licks his tiny paw and resumes being judgmental. You go to bed early. Not to sleep, but to lie down. The axe stays by the hearth tonight. You don't want its weight within reach. The dreams come slow. You're walking through a corridor of scaffolds. Each one holds someone who looks like someone else. The baker, the miller, Corwin, yourself. They all look away when you pass. You wake before dawn. No knock, no letter, no job. You sit at the table eating a crust of yesterday's bread, wondering if this is what peace feels like, slightly stale and much too quiet. You head to Elfrida's just after sunrise. She's in the garden, holding a pair of rusted shears and a scowl. Took you long enough. You kneel beside her, and for the next hour you prune lavender. Slowly, clumsily. The scent sticks to your fingers. Historians still argue whether executioners ever led normal lives, if they gardened, courted, laughed at bad jokes. You could settle that with a single sprig of sage, and this image, two people cutting herbs in silence, letting the world be elsewhere for a while. Did you write it down? She asks, suddenly. You look up. What? The boy. His name. His whisper. You shake your head. She nods, satisfied. Good. She hands you a small bundle of clippings. Hang these in your window. Keep the rot away. You want to ask what kind? She doesn't say. You head home with your hands smelling like earth and soft purple. Corwin is waiting by your door. He's holding the ledger. I added a line, he says, eyes wide. You open it. Just a single entry. Unlisted. No crime. No record. Final words remembered. You close the book. Say nothing. He nods, turns and walks away. You hang the lavender by the window. And for the first time in a while, you don't touch the axe all day. You'd think it gets easier. Not the act itself, but the space before it. The hour where the town breathes around you, where the wind moves differently, and where your body already knows it's about to be turned into a tool again. That hour never softens. It just learns to speak more quietly. Today there is no list, no envelope, no noble seal pressed into wax and secrecy. Just a boy from the guild house, panting and nervous, delivering a verbal message. There's been a sentence passed by the bishop's court. You're needed at the cloister chapel before dusk. You thank him with a nod and a copper coin. He runs off like he's chased by spirits. You stand in your doorway for a long moment. The bishop's court. That means politics disguised as piety. Accusations born from scripture and soot. And you've never been asked to perform within a chapel's walls before. The idea makes your knuckles tense. You prepare anyway. You polish the axe, though you suspect it won't be used. Not within holy ground. More likely they'll want a rope. Something quiet, humble, symbolic. Historians still debate the overlap of church and gallows, whether excommunication and execution were ever truly separate. But here in this little town, they intertwine like ivy and ruin. Corwin walks with you this time. You don't ask him to. He just shows up, boots muddy shoulders, hunched, like he's preparing for rain. You don't have to come, you say. I know, he answers. The chapel looms at the far edge of town, nestled against the graveyard wall. It smells of old wax-damp stone and dried lilies. You hate it instantly. A deacon greets you at the door, eyes wide, hands pale. This way, he whispers, like the condemned might still be sleeping. You follow. They've cleared a space in the crypt. A makeshift platform of crates and linen. A priest stands beside a young woman no more than 20, her wrists bound with rosary beads. She's humming. Not a hymn. Something older. Folk music. She confessed the priest says eyes flicking away from yours. Recanted her blasphemies. But the sentence was passed regardless. For the safety of the soul. You nod once. The words pass through you like wind through empty cloth. The girl turns to you. You're the one with the eyes, she says softly. You blink. The one from my dreams. You say nothing. I thought you'd be taller, she adds, smiling. They hand you a length of cloth and a small wooden cross. You've never hanged anyone inside a crypt before. She walks to the crates herself, bare feet soft against the cold stone. You wrap the cloth around her neck, tie the knots precisely. Not cruelly, not lazily, just exactly. She closes her eyes. The priest mutters a prayer that you don't listen to. You pull. The crates shift. She falls. It's over quickly. You stand still, hands at your sides. The priest wipes sweat from his collar. The deacon looks like he might vomit. Corwin stares at the girl's shoes. There's no applause here, no silence either. Just the low hum of regret pressed deep into stone. They give you a coin pouch, smaller than usual, but you don't count it. You walk home alone. Corwin stays behind. The air smells like lilacs again. You resent it for being beautiful today. At your door, Elfrida is waiting. You did it, she says, not as a question. You nod. Come inside. You obey. There's wine on the table. Bread. A plate of cheese that's sweating in the warmth of the hearth. She pours you a glass. You drink. You should stop, she says. You look up. Soon, she adds. Not yet, but soon. You nod again. Corwin, you ask. She shrugs. Still at the chapel. You drink more wine. The room begins to soften around the edges. You did it gently, she asks. Yes. She pours another glass. Then that's enough, she says. You fall asleep in the chair. The lavender bundle hangs by the window, still shedding its scent. Your dreams are slow. A river. Pub? Dump a boat. No passengers. Just a floating axe drifting toward the horizon like it wants to disappear. The next morning greets you like an old friend you're no longer sure you trust. The light through the window is silver grey cool and slow falling across your face like the brush of calloused fingers. The fire has long since died, but the hearth still holds a trace of heat, like a body that left only minutes before. You sit up in Elfrida's chair. She's already gone, of course. Left a cloth draped over your shoulders and a note beside the breadboard. The garden needs turning. There's a new patch by the well. You'll know it. You smile, just a little. The kind that barely lifts your cheeks, but settles behind your eyes for hours. You walk home slowly, hands in your cloak. boots scuffing at the road like you're trying not to be heard. There's no one in the square. No carts, no drums, no magistrates with their mouths full of orders. The scaffold waits like a forgotten stool, quiet, weathered, alone. You reach your cottage. The door creaks. Gerald greets you with an unimpressed blink, perched beside a crust of yesterday's oatcake. You're not sure if he's guarding it or avoiding it. You feed him anyway. There's no summons today, no sentence, no list. You sharpen the axe anyway, but only out of habit. The whetstone sings less than usual. Maybe the blade is tired too. You hang it up, fold the cloth, sweep the floor. It's too quiet, so you open the window. The breeze smells like loam, like Elfrida's new patch by the well. You know it's a grave. Or close enough. You don't ask. You won't. Historians still argue about how long executioners were allowed to serve, how many years a person could carry the blade before the weight tipped them inward. Some say it was until their hands shook. Others say it was when they started asking for names. You wonder what the ledger would say about you. You open it, staring at the last entry Corwin made. Unlisted. No crime. No record. Final words remembered. You close it without adding anything. You spend the afternoon in the garden. Not yours, Elfrida's. The patch by the well is freshly turned. You kneel, fingers in the dirt, palms pressing down, as though you could root yourself here if only for an hour. You plant nothing. Just loosen the soil. Pull weeds. Listen to the birds. You return home just before sunset. Corwin is waiting outside. He doesn't say anything, just holds out the ledger. You take it, open it. He's added another line. This page left intentionally blank. You look at him. He shrugs. Thought you might want a place to stop. You nod. He smiles, then walks away, hands in his sleeves. The night comes gentle. You light only one candle. Cook only one egg. Drink only water. You sit by the half-legs, tucked beneath you, back warm from the fire. Gerard curls up beside the axe. You don't move him. The lavender by the window is dry now. Its petals fall like quiet snow. You sleep early. And this time the dream is different. It begins in the square, but the crowd is gone. The scaffold is covered in moss. The axe hangs from a tree, swinging gently in the wind untouched. You're just watching, not acting. And it feels like peace. So now, as the last candle flickers down and the weight of the day fades from your shoulders, take a long, slow breath. Let it settle. You've walked the entire rhythm of a life most have only feared in stories, a life spent not in cruelty, but in precision, in silence, in the strange spaces between law and mercy. You've felt the axe grow heavy in your hands. You've stood on the scaffold while the wind held its breath. You've listened to final words that never made the records, and you've carried them further than any history book ever could. You've met quiet grief, uneasy peace, and the kind of understanding that only comes when there's no applause, no forgiveness, just the stillness after the swing. But now, that world recedes. The crowd has gone home. The axe is clean and at rest. The gallows are empty. The page is closed. You are no longer the hand of the law or the breath of fear. You're simply here. Let that feeling settle deep in your chest. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. Not a verdict, not a motion, not even a breath. Just rest. The sky outside has softened. Maybe it's raining. Maybe the stars are blinking like they do only for you. Either way, you're safe now. The blade sleeps. And so do you. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping softly into the hazy, eye-watering world of medieval peasant life. A place where the air is smoky, your straw mattress is probably full of fleas, and your eyesight is, well, not great. No optometrists, no bifocals, no handy over-the-counter eye drops or blue light glasses. Just you, your foggy corneas, and a long day of weeding turnips while half squinting at whatever's not trying to sting you. You probably won't survive this, to be honest, not because of the back-breaking labour or the lack of antibiotics, but because you'll spend 14 hours a day crawling around the dirt with no sunglasses, no painkillers, and a healthy coating of soot stuck to your eyelashes. You wake up to the sound of chickens doing their usual chaos. No alarm clock just clucking. The room is dim, the shutters close tight against the early morning mist. Not that it matters, you still can't really see anything clearly. Your eyes feel gummy, like someone glued your eyelids together with wood ash and regret. That's because they sort of did. You slept next to a dying hearth full of smoky coals and shared your bed with 3 generations of dust straw. And let's be honest, several unidentified beetles. There's no clean water splash moment. The nearest thing to a basin is a wooden bucket outside, and the water's been sitting overnight, collecting everything from ash to mosquito larvae. You squint at your reflection in the water. Can't quite make out your face. Is that your nose or a frog? Bad eyesight isn't something you have in this world, it's just life. You don't know what 20/20 vision is, because no one around you is bragging about seeing individual leaves on trees. Most people just assume blurriness is how the world's supposed to look. After all, you've got bigger problems like whether you'll finish this week's grain ration, or if the roof will fall in before next Tuesday. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants really noticed or cared about visual impairment, since literacy was rare and long-distance vision wasn't exactly in demand while threshing barley. But you notice especially when you try to thread a needle for mending your one and only tunic. You keep poking your own thumb instead. You rub your eyes and stand. Your joints crack like a roasting spit. The hut is dark, with only a bit of amber light seeping through the gaps in the wall. Everything is grey-brown. The table, the floor, the air. Even your family looks like they've been dusted with the same layer of medieval beige. The hearth's barely burning, and you stumble slightly as you move toward it. You stub your toe on the same splintered bench as you do every morning. Maybe today you'll finally fix it. You won't. Your morning task is feeding the animals. You shuffle out into the chill. The world beyond your door is fuzzy, the fields smudged like a painting left in the rain. You blink, hoping for clarity. You get a bug in your eye instead. Lovely. You manage to reach the pen. The goat eyes you with suspicion, and frankly, you don't blame her. You forgot to milk her yesterday, and she remembers. You fumble with the rope knot. It's fraying the fibres stiff. Your fingers are stiff, too swollen from yesterday's labour, and last night's sleep on what might generously be called a hay bale. As you work, your vision clears a bit. Not because your eyes are better, but because the rising sun finally lights the fog from behind. You squint and see your neighbour, well, a vaguely human shape, dragging a bucket of something. You think she waves. Maybe. Hard to say. Could be a chicken flapping behind her. Your day will be long, filled with digging, bending, lifting, chopping. You'll need to identify herbs by smell, because seeing them is dicey, and every mushroom you find looks like it could either cure your headache or cause you to hallucinate that the Archbishop is a duck. You return to the hut and prepare the morning meal, porridge made from yesterday's barley scraps, and possibly a rock. You squint into the pot. No rock, just a very chewy barley husk. Still you eat. It's warm, it's filling, it doesn't require vision. That's the thing, everything here is designed for survival, not clarity. You don't need perfect eyesight. You just need to know where the shovel is, and how not to trip over the pig. As you step outside again to start the real work of the day, you can feel the ache beginning already in your neck, in your temples, in your dry, blink, heavy eyes. But there's no time to rest. The field waits, and the weeds don't care if you can see them clearly or not. By the time the sun is up, really up, you're already knee-deep in a root vegetable you're not entirely sure is edible. Could be a turnip. Could be a malformed parsnip. Vision doesn't exactly help you here, and besides, everything's coated in the same sticky brown mud. Welcome to the glamorous world of peasant agriculture, where you rely more on memory texture and your increasingly sarcastic intuition than on actually seeing what's in front of you. You bend over again, back creaking in protest, and catch yourself squinting at a clump of green you thought was parsley. It's not. It's a bird's nest, still warm. You apologise and keep digging. You've never heard the word optometrist, let alone met one. The idea of a person whose job is to fix vision is so foreign it might as well be witchcraft. And to be fair, if someone did show up offering eyeglasses, they'd probably be chased out of town for heresy or overpricing. Historians still argue whether medieval people noticed when their sight got worse, or whether they just assumed everyone's world looked like a smudged oil painting after 35. The truth is, most people never had good eyesight to begin with. Between cataracts, infections, dust smoke, and the odd whack from a farming tool, most adults walked around with some degree of permanent blur. You included, and yet somehow everything still gets done. You navigate fields. You count goats. You mend a torn tunic using a fishbone needle. It's not fast or precise, but the needle gets through the fabric, the thread follows, and you only poke yourself 3 times today. That's a win. The hut when you return midday is hot and thick, with the smell of sweat and boiled onions. You squint at the figure hunched over the hearth. Your cousin. Your mother. A very large sack of laundry. Hard to tell until she turns and hands you a bowl. Lunch is more porridge, but with a hint of dried garlic. Fancy. You eat it slowly, staring into the steam, like it might reveal the meaning of life, or at least where you left your second best spoon. You massage your temples. Your eyes sting. Not from tears, just from existing. But there's no talk of eye strain. There's no understanding of refractive error or visual acuity. You either see enough to do your job, or you figure out how to fake it. Children are no better. They're constantly bumping into things, tripping over goats, mistaking frogs for dinner. But no one blames them. They just slap a cabbage leaf on the bruise and move on. You remember a neighbour once claiming she could see the glow of ripe berries from 10 paces away. Either she had miracle vision, or she was trying to get out of latrine duty. The latter seems more likely. Some older folks develop what you now know would be called cataracts. Their eyes go cloudy milky. They stop sewing. They stop walking far. But they still sit at the hearth and offer advice on how to boil nettles properly. Everyone listens, even if they can't see who's talking. Occasionally someone claims their vision was healed after a visit to a nearby shrine. They rubbed their eyes with holy water, or stared at a relic until they could spot the moon again. Did it work? Who knows? Maybe belief clears the mind enough that you forget how much you can't see. You've heard of a travelling monk with a polished crystal he held up to his eye to read sacred texts. Rumours say he could magnify letters using the curved end of a water-filled glass globe. Sounds ridiculous. But then again, so does boiling willow bark to numb your teeth, and you've done that more than once. In town, a peddler once tried to sell someone a seeing stone. It was just a rounded piece of river glass. He claimed it helped you read runes and see witches. He was gone by morning. So was the stone. There's no reading for you anyway. Your world is tactile, c'est pas tactile. Soil under your nails, wool under your fingertips. Warmth radiating from the fire when you're close enough to feel it. Sight is a bonus, a sometimes feature. You return to the field in the afternoon with a makeshift rake and a vague idea of what part of the soil needs loosening. You kneel squinting. You tug. You swear softly as a clod of dirt goes flying and smacks you in the nose. You pause. Lean back. Breathe. From this angle, lying on your side in a potato rut, the world looks soft, fuzzy, almost peaceful. The wind brushes your face. You close one eye, then the other. Vision isn't the only sense that matters. You can smell the earth, hear the crows, feel the air, shiver as clouds pass in front of the sun. You don't need glasses to know it's about to rain, and you don't need to see clearly to know you should keep working anyway. By late afternoon, your eyes are dry, your back is tight, and there's a distinct smudge on your cheek from where you tried to wipe away sweat, but mostly just rearrange the dirt. You pause to catch your breath, one hand shielding your eyes from the angled sun, which, despite being filtered through a layer of medieval fog, still manages to make you squint like someone's aiming a mirror at your forehead. You reach for your hand tools, basic wooden implements that have seen better centuries. There's a small hoe, a bent knife for root vegetables, and something that used to be a trowel before time and rust made it philosophical. You pick up the hoe and squint at the blade edge. Is that a crack or just dried mud? You scrape at it with your thumb. Mud. Probably. Even with blurry vision, you can tell your tools are not in top shape. But then again, neither are you. The job today is weeding, which requires patience, calluses, and a vague sense of what's a weed and what's a crop. You kneel again and get to work. It's a slow process. You tug at green things, sniff their roots, crush leaves between your fingers. You rely on shape and touch, not sight. Your fingers know more than your eyes do. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually distinguished between certain plants or just yanked anything that looked wrong. Judging by the row, you accidentally de-leafed. Last week, the answer is probably a bit of both. Occasionally a shadow crosses your work, a cloud a crow, a relative coming to complain about something. You squint upward, eyes watering. It's your uncle, maybe. Or the neighbour, who always smells like cabbage. He points vaguely at the field, mutters something about the rain coming early, then wanders off before you can answer. Your hands are stained green. Your knees hurt. Your vision has begun doing that thing where everything starts to sparkle slightly, like someone rubbed mint oil on your retinas. You blink. Doesn't help. You keep pulling weeds. Back in the hut, your aunt is trying to sort flax fibres by feel. She holds them close to her nose, muttering about the texture, the weight, the grain of the stalks. She hasn't seen clearly in 5 years, but her fingers haven't let her down yet. She asks you to help with the spindle, your favourite. Threading a length of yarn into the notch requires eyesight. Or at least it should. You squint, stick your tongue out slightly, as all skilled medieval threaders do, and try to guide the fraying end into place. It misses. Twice. Then with a bit of breath and luck, it slides through. You celebrate with a loud sigh. Your aunt doesn't look up. People often imagine medieval life as deeply visual tapestries, stained glass, illuminated texts. But for peasants, it was texture over colour, movement over image. You don't need clarity to haul water. You need balance. You don't need sharpness to gut a fish. You need a steady wrist and decent aim. Dinner is barley stew with something green floating in it. You ask what it is. No one knows. You eat it anyway. Afterwards, there's sewing to be done. Your cousin has torn his only good tunic again, probably climbing something, or chasing someone, or being chased. You sigh and squint at the rip. The candle flickers. The thread is nearly invisible. Your needle is slightly bent. This will go well. You try once. Miss. Twice. Miss. Third time you jab your finger. A soft curse slips out. Your aunt nods in approval. Eventually you manage to sew 3 inches of uneven, possibly backward stitching. The tunic looks worse. but it's stitched. Good enough. The candle gutters. You blow it out, and suddenly the room is nothing but shape and movement. You know where the table is, where the fire pit is, where the stool always shifts slightly to the left when you sit on it. You move through it with ease. You don't need to see the edges. You remember them. You lie down on your straw mattress, one arm tucked behind your head. The ceiling is just a grey blur. Somewhere outside a dog barks. A sheep answers. You're not sure who won the argument. You rub your eyes one last time. They're sore. But they did the job today. They saw enough to pull weeds, mend, fabric dodge goats, and not fall in a well. That's a successful day. You drift to sleep not in darkness but in blur. In a world where nothing's sharp but everything still happens. You wake in the pre-dawn dark with your face half buried in straw and a beetle staring at you from 2 inches away. At least you think it's a beetle. Could also be a seed, or a pebble, or a tiny demon judging you for your stitching skills. You squint and it wobbles into focus just long enough to scurry out of sight. Gone. Like most of your clarity. Your eyes sting already. Dry from the smoke, scratchy from the dust, puffy from whatever was in last night's stew. You sit up slowly, bones creaking like a badly maintained wagon, and you feel it, the familiar itch just behind your eyelids. Not a painful itch. More of a medieval peasant's baseline level of mildly inflamed and likely allergic to your own life. Your hut is still filled with last night's fire smoke. It clings to everything, clothes, blankets, thoughts. The hearth may keep you warm in the winter, but it also doubles as an excellent eye irritant generator. No chimney, of course. Just a hole in the roof that sort of remembers to vent things. Sometimes. Historians still argue whether most medieval peasant homes were truly windowless or just deeply indifferent to proper ventilation. What we know for sure is this: if you lived in one, your eyes were red. Always. You make your way outside, blinking against the chill. The sun hasn't risen yet, but there's that thin, metallic shimmer to the air that tells you it's thinking about it. A morning mist curls over the fields. It's beautiful in the abstract if you could see more than 5 feet in front of you. You breathe deep, then immediately sneeze. The world at this hour is a minefield of eye irritants. Wind carries particles of chaff ash and something that might be powdered sheep. Your hair is full of hay. Your shirt is full of hay. Your eyes are definitely full of hay. And then there's the dust. Endless enthusiastic dust. Dry soil kicked up by ox hooves. Bits of last season's husks ground into the soles of your shoes. You rub your eyes knowing full well it won't help. It never does. But it feels like doing something, and that's all that matters. As you get the goats out of their pen, one of them sneezes directly at your face. You blink rapidly, no point yelling. That goat outranks you socially. You pause at the water barrel to splash your face rubbing at your lids until your eyelashes stick together in protest. The water helps. For about 3 seconds, but the real culprit always is the hearth. Inside your aunt is stoking it, again feeding it bits of peat and dry bark. The smoke winds upward, curling like a lazy ghost, and finds your eyes immediately. You flinch. She doesn't notice. Or maybe she does and assumes it's just your natural expression now. You help with breakfast prep, grinding grain, slicing onions, dodging splinters. The onion juice joins the smoke as part of your daily ocular assault. You tear up instinctively and your cousin pats your shoulder like you're emotionally moved by the family meal. You nod and blink away the burn. One of the lesser-known medieval tools of torture, onion peeling. No record of it being used intentionally for that purpose, but you're not ruling it out. You recall a story from a travelling herbalist who once swore that if you rub a mix of goose fat and wild thyme under your eyelids, you'll see clearly for a week. You tried it once. Your vision stayed blurry, and you smelled like a roast for 3 days. Today you're weaving a small reed mat for the corner of the hut. This requires fine motor skills and a vague idea of where the reeds end and your fingers begin. You squint. The tips of the reeds blend together into a friendly green mush. You squint harder. The green mush becomes a less friendly green blob. You work anyway. Your eyes water again. Could be strain. Could be the fact that the sheep have decided the windbreak is their personal bathroom again. You wipe your eyes on your sleeve. You poke yourself in the eye by accident. The sheep stare without sympathy. The mat ends up crooked. You blame the light, or the smoke, or the sheep, probably all three. By midday, the sun is overhead blindingly strong in that uniquely medieval way. There's no hat, no sunglasses, and the nearest shade is cast by a low fence that also houses the chickens. You lean against it anyway, squinting at the horizon. You think you see the merchant wagon coming down the path? Or maybe it's a hay bale, or a very fast-moving cow. You won't know until it's within 10 paces. This is normal. No one in your world expects perfect vision. You just need to see well enough not to step in anything, or to recognise your neighbour before you accidentally insult their goat. Your aunt hands you a folded cloth soaked in cool water. You press it to your face. It's heaven. Your eyes stop aching for 5 blessed minutes. The cloth smells faintly of mint. You sigh, then realise it's not mint, it's just mould. Still refreshing though, the day goes on. You squint, you blink, you rub your temples, your head pounds in that way it does when light and smoke and dust all team up to make you regret having a face. But somehow you still manage to see enough, to sort grain, to slice leeks, to walk barefoot across uneven stones without tripping. You don't see clearly, but you see enough. And sometimes in this world, that's plenty. The headache begins just as the sun starts to slope downward, like some sort of medieval clock telling you that yes, it's time for your temples to pulse, and for your eyeballs to feel like they're being gently pressed from the inside. You squint up at the sky, but the light has taken on that golden squinty hue that makes everything feel just a little too sharp and a little too blurry at the same time. You rub your eyes, again. At this point you're basically a full-time face masser. The pain creeps in slowly, like a neighbour you didn't invite, but who insists on telling you about their third cousin's cow. Behind your eyes, behind your ears, in that soft space where your thoughts usually live. It's not a stabbing pain, it's a low, persistent, throbbing one, the kind that makes you forget what you were doing every 7 minutes. There's no word for eye strain in your vocabulary, no Latin phrase, no soothing cup of peppermint tea while you Google if it's a brain tumour. You simply endure it, like you endure everything else: bad shoes, poor lighting, questionable cheese. Historians still argue whether headaches were considered a real ailment for peasants or just a side effect of existing. Some monasteries wrote of melancholy of the head, and others prescribed hot poultices, chanting, or beetroot boiled in wine. But here, now standing in a hut filled with onion fumes and the low-grade funk of wet wool, your only remedy is silence, and maybe leaning your forehead against a cool wall. You do that. It doesn't help. But again, it feels like doing something. You aren't alone in this. Everyone you know gets them. Your uncle calls them the hammer. Your aunt says it's caused by wind demons. Your cousin just groans and hides under a blanket for an hour. There is a kind of camaraderie in communal suffering. You think about going to Elfrida, the local herbal woman. She's always got something steeping. But last time she gave you a headache potion, it smelled like boiled socks and made you hiccup for 2 days. You pass. Instead you lie flat on a wooden bench in the hut, a damp cloth over your eyes. You press your fingers to your temples in little circles. 1, 2, 3, Spokojnie. 3. Chill. Are you better yet? No. But your hands are cleaner now. Dinner is approaching. Your vision is hazy, your forehead tight, and someone has spilled something crunchy on the floor. You can't see what it is, but you step on it barefoot and immediately regret all your life choices. You help stir the pot with a wooden spoon that's so warped it resembles a shipwreck. Inside cabbage leaks some grain, possibly a small pebble. You squint at the contents trying to identify whether it's ready. You base your decision entirely on smell. Not because it's a better method, but because you can't see. You eat slowly. Warm food helps. A little. Mostly it distracts you. You sit near the fire, but not too close. The smoke hurts your eyes. But the warmth helps your jaw, which aches now from all the clenching you didn't realise you were doing all day. Pain relief isn't a concept you even think about. You don't get breaks, and you certainly don't get pills. If you're lucky, someone has a dried sprig of meadowsweet or willow bark to chew on. You tried that once. Tasted like bitter wood. Might have worked. Might have just numbed your tongue. You remember an old woman in the next village over who swore by sticking a cold turnip slice behind her ears when she got the eye hum. You tried it once for fun. The turnip slipped. You smelled like soup for hours. Someone in the family suggests prayer. Another recommends pressing your thumb into the roof of your mouth while staring at a single point on the wall. You try both, unsure which works, or if either does. But at least no one expects you to be functional for a bit. You lie down on your cot after the meal, eyes closed, cloth over your face. Arms flopped out like you've been felled by a very small emotional wind. The pain is still there, but softer now. You've reached the dull, echoing part, like a headache's after party. You think about what it would be like to see clearly, to have sharp edges, to read letters, to spot a bird in a tree and know what kind it is. But those are stories for nobles, for monks, for people with candles that don't smell like burning socks. You drift in and out, not quite asleep, not quite awake. Your head floats a little. The pain loosens its grip. Your eyes stop burning. For now, and in this fuzzy, thudding, smoke-filled silence, you remember tomorrow will be exactly the same. But you'll survive that one too. The next morning, your eyes open reluctantly. They're gummy, puffy, and decidedly unimpressed by the new day. You rub them gently with the back of your hand, which smells faintly of damp earth and yesterday's leek broth. Outside, the rooster has decided it's time for everyone to suffer. Inside, the fire is out, and the hut feels like the inside of a bread oven that never quite preheated. You swing your legs off the straw-stuffed mattress and immediately step on a thistle. Barefoot. Again. You mutter something soft and unrepeatable and limp your way toward the hearth. There's tea to be made if you can find the right mix of herbs that don't taste like regret. The family's tiny herb shelf is a collection of dried hope bundles of chamomile, a bit of yarrow, a small pouch of crushed poppy seed, strictly doled out, and something labelled in shaky handwriting as God's soothing blend. You're pretty sure that last one is just old grass. You reach for the poppy pouch. Just a pinch. Elfrida says it helps with pain. Some days it does. Other days it just makes your mouth feel like it's full of flannel. You drop a tiny scoop into the steaming water and swirl it, watching the liquid go murky like a pond full of ancient secrets. Historians still argue whether peasants had regular access to opium from poppies, or if it was mostly controlled by monasteries and wealthier apothecaries. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You certainly don't get a daily dose, but when pain becomes too much, and it often does, you find someone who knows how to measure carefully and quietly. You sip slowly. The heat soothes your teeth. Your eyes stop watering for a few precious minutes. Not gone, of course, just quiet. Mid-morning, you join your aunt to gather herbs from the edges of the forest. You squint through the underbrush, looking for recognisable shapes. She doesn't name the plant she smells, then crushes a leaf, tastes a bit of root. You follow suit less skillfully. You chew a leaf that turns out to be far too bitter. She raises an eyebrow. You pretend it's fine. The two of you gather mint feverfew nettle carefully, and something she swears will help your woolly head. You don't argue. Back at the hut, you lay the herbs out on a drying rack that's just an old window shutter with string stretched across it. You arrange them by feel, smooth, scratchy, leafy, prickly. Sight is less useful now. The light indoors is patchy, mostly shadow. You boil water again, toss in a bit of fever, few, some nettle and a prayer. The steam rises and makes your eyes water, but in a good way this time. The headache hasn't returned yet. Maybe the poppy worked. Maybe your aunt's woolly head blend is a miracle. Maybe your brain just forgot to ache for a while. You help with lunch root mash, pan-seared barley cake, burned on one side, and a stew that smells faintly of boot leather. You don't mind. The warm broth is comforting, and there's a softness to the day now, like everything has decided not to press so hard against you. This is what passes for relief in your world. No pills, no ice packs, just warm tea, herbal whispers, and the hope that nothing gets worse. After lunch, Elfrida visits. She's brought a little jar of beeswax and crushed marjoram, a mixture she swears helps with temple pressure. She smells like fennel and wet bark. You let her dab the mixture onto your forehead. It's slightly sticky, but cool, and oddly comforting. She tells you about a man 3 villages over who tried curing his headaches by wearing a dried lizard around his neck. Claims it worked until the lizard crumbled. You both laugh gently. Not too loud, in case the headache's listening. Elfrida inspects your eyes with the squinting scrutiny of someone who's done this a lot. She nods solemnly. You need more sleep, she says. You nod. Everyone does. She leaves you a tiny sprig of lavender to tuck under your pillow. That afternoon you return to weaving. The threads are thin and your fingers tremble slightly. But the pain is absent. Just a fuzzy halo of exhaustion where the ache used to be. Historians still debate whether medieval herbal medicine offered genuine relief or simply gave people a sense of control in an uncontrollable world. Maybe it's both. You don't care. If the beeswax helps, you'll smear it on until you look like a candle. You finish the mat, slightly crooked, but whole. You place it by the fire and sit on it, immediately claiming it as yours before anyone else can. Later you sit with your back to the hut wall, sipping another cup of minty mysterious tea. Your cousin asks if it's helping. You shrug. It doesn't hurt, you say. That's enough for today. By early evening, the wind shifts, carrying the sweet tang of roasted barley from a neighbour's hearth, mingled with the less sweet scent of sheep. You're hauling a bundle of firewood back from the edge of the forest. Vision blurred slightly from the combination of setting sun, sweat in your eyes, and whatever floating pollen decided to take up residence in your sinuses today. You don't see the boy until you're nearly on top of him, young barefoot, running toward you with panic on his face, and a hand wrapped in a bloodied scrap of linen. You recognise him. He's the blacksmith's apprentice, and judging by the angle of his fingers, the bellows chain caught him again. There's no real emergency response in your world. There's just walking quickly and hoping the injured person doesn't faint before you get them to someone who vaguely knows what they're doing. And in this village, that someone is regrettably you. Back at the hut, you sit him down near the hearth and fetch the family's little box of healing things, a collection of beeswax, dried herbs, cloth strips, and a tiny iron tweezer that doubles as a hair plucker. You squint at the wound. His fingers are bruised, maybe broken, but the skin isn't torn too badly. You do what you can. You clean it with boiled water, mash up a bit of comfrey root with goose grease, and gently bandage the mess. He cries. You try not to. You remember something your grandfather once told you. The pain doesn't care if you see it coming. He was talking about weather, but it fits here too. Historians still argue whether the role of first aid caregiver was gendered in medieval peasant life, or simply whoever happened to be nearby and not squeamish. In your case, you were both near and very used to the sight of mangled fingers. After the boy leaves wobbling slightly, but grateful, you sit down and exhale. Your own hands are shaking. Not from fear, from fatigue, from tension that never quite leaves. You rub your temples. Again. The headache is creeping back. It's always just around the corner waiting. You shuffle to the hearth, now burning warmly. You dip your finger into a small tin of the beeswax sage balm Elfrida left behind. You dab it at your temples. It smells of wood smoke and green things. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. You do it anyway. Dinner is nearly ready. You peel turnips, badly cutting them into uneven chunks that make your aunt sigh and take the knife from you. You're not offended. Your hands aren't steady. Your eyes aren't sharp. You sit by the fire and watch her work. Her fingers are quick. Her eyes squint often, but she rarely misses a cut. You admire that. She tells a story about a village healer who once tried to cure a broken leg by burying the patient up to the waist in mud and chanting at the moon. Did it work, you ask? Of course not, she says. But the mud was very cooling. You both laugh. There's comfort in absurdity. After dinner, turnip mash, and what may have once been a pigeon, you help tidy up your eyes, still sore, your head still humming at a low, persistent frequency. You step outside for air, letting the coolness of the evening wrap around you, like a damp, slightly judgmental blanket. The stars are starting to appear. You can't make out most of them, of course. Just smudges of light, like the sky itself is tired too. You sit on a log near the fence, staring into the vague blur of the horizon. Someone once told you that pain and vision are like cousins always showing up at the same time, always overstaying their welcome. You believe it. There's rarely a day when your eyes don't hurt or your head doesn't ache. But somehow the chores get done. The food gets cooked. The people get helped. You're not sure if that's resilience or stubbornness. Historians still argue the difference. Your cousin joins you with a mug of warm beer, sets it beside you, then wanders back inside without a word. You sip. It's sour, slightly warm, but it dulls the edge a little. The village is quiet now, smoke rising gently from thatched rooftops. Dogs barking in the far distance. The occasional laugh or cough echoing down the lane. You press your fingers to your temples again and close your eyes. It's not better, but it's not worse. And some days that's the win. You don't remember falling asleep, but you do remember waking twice. First to the sound of something scuttling across the rafters, probably a rat, possibly your imagination. And second to the unmistakable sting of wood smoke working its way into your nose and settling there like an uninvited thought. When you sit up, the air is thick. Not in a poetic way. In a you can taste the fireplace way. You blink. Your vision is worse than usual. Everything is blurry, and your eyes feel like you slept with a handful of hay jammed beneath each eyelid. You fumble for the water bucket. It's half empty and has something floating in it. You scoop some water anyway and splash your face. The sting is immediate. You remember yesterday's balm and reach for the tin. The lid sticks. You pry it open with a wooden spoon and smear the cooling wax under your eyes like some sort of sleep-deprived gladiator. It helps a little. This morning's task is preparing to dig out the drainage ditch that's been threatening to become a moat. Not glamorous, not fun, and absolutely not easy when you can't tell the difference between the shovel and the broken hoe at first glance. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had personal tools or simply shared a collective pile of vaguely usable implements. In your case, the pile exists, and it's shaped like a collapsed fence covered in rust and wishful thinking. You pick the tool with the least splinters and head toward the backfield. The ground is soft from last night's rain, which is great for digging and terrible for staying upright. You slip 3 times before reaching the ditch. Your knees are soaked. You sigh. You squint at the trench. The water's murky. You see something moving and it could be a frog, could be a potato. You decide not to investigate. You work slowly, trying not to strain your neck. Every time you lift your head to glance around, your vision blurs further. It's not just tiredness, it's brightness. The sun is cruel today, bouncing off the wet earth in blinding little flashes. You shield your face with one hand and dig with the other. A neighbour stops by, sees your one-eyed trench technique, and offers you a scrap of cloth to tie around your forehead. You accept it gratefully. It's not a sun hat, but it helps a bit. At least now you're only squinting at 70% power. As you dig, your mind wanders. You think about what it would be like to see sharply, to recognise people from a distance, to read signs or markings without leaning in, like you're sniffing them. You think of the nobleman who once passed through the village, tall, proud, wearing polished boots and tiny round spectacles perched on his nose. The whole village whispered for days, "Glass on your face," to help you see sorcery. Later you learnt they were called reading stones, thick glass lenses monks used to magnify scripture. Rare, expensive, useless in the fields. Your cousin arrives with bread and a gourd of watery ale. You eat sitting on a rock, blinking slowly at the horizon while trying to figure out if the clouds are coming your way or not. You decide yes, based on the direction of a cow's tail. Science. You finish your meal and return to the trench. Your eyes sting. The sun has moved, making new shadows to squint into. You rinse your face again in the ditch water, immediately regretting it. Your vision swims. You may have just rubbed mud into your eyes. Or frog. It's unclear. By late afternoon, you've finished the trench, sort of. It's deeper, wetter, less terrible than it was. You stand back and admire your blurry handiwork. Could be a ditch, could be a hole, could be art. You'll let the rain decide. Back at the hut, your aunt is boiling nettles again. The steam fogs the window slits, and the smell hits you halfway through the door. It's sharp green and oddly comforting. She hands you a cloth to wipe your face. You use it on your eyes first, which feels like wringing out a full week of squinting. You sit beside her and help with the leaves, sorting them by feel. Soft, rough-stemmed, curled. You don't need sight for this, just patience. After dinner, someone tells a story about a man who tried to create glasses using polished river stones. He wore them strapped to his nose with sheep gut. They gave him headaches, but he swore he could see individual stars. You wonder if he was just drunk. The hut grows quiet. Your eyes burn again. You press the balm against your temples and lie flat on the mat you wove last week, the crooked one. You stare at the rafters. They're blurry, sure, but they're home, and that somehow is enough. Night falls with the slow finality of a damp wool blanket being drawn over your village, uneven, scratchy, and a bit heavier than it needs to be. You sit by the low fire legs tucked under. You nursing what might be your 4th mug of barley tea today. You're not counting. You're just grateful it's warm and not full of floating debris. Your eyes are sore again. Not sharp pain, more like a low, throbbing ache that feels like it's humming quietly behind your eyeballs. You shift your gaze toward the firelight, hoping the flicker might help you focus. It doesn't. The flames blur and dance into each other like ghosts at a wedding. Your cousin is threading something by candlelight again, because apparently her eyesight was a divine gift bestowed by the saints. You glance at her squint and decide not to ruin the moment by asking for help. You'd rather live in the illusion that you could still thread a needle if you really wanted to. You lie back, one arm folded under your head, and stare at the ceiling, being blurry shadowed, full of character. You watch a spider crawl its way across a cobweb as if it's walking a tightrope. Or maybe that's your imagination. Could also be soot. Do you remember colours your aunt asks suddenly from the darkened corner of the hut? You laugh softly, unsure if she's joking. Then she continues. I mean, really remember them. Not just what they're called. You think about it, green is mostly just plant-shaped. Blue is what your fingertips feel like in winter. Red is the heat from the hearth. Colour for you has become sensation more than sight. Historians still debate how much attention medieval peasants paid to colour, given the limited dyes and the dominance of earthy tones. You imagine that people saw more than they let on, but over time the words faded, and all that remained was the feeling of warmth or coolness of light or shadow. You turn to your side and watch the last of the candle melt into its stub. No one speaks. The hut hums with silence, by crackling someone shifting in their sleep, a goat snoring faintly outside. Your head still throbs a little. You press your fingers into your brow. You're not hoping to fix it, just trying to interrupt it. You trace circles gently, imagining you're smoothing the pain out, like a wrinkle in a tunic. At some point, the smell of smoke becomes more noticeable again. Someone pokes the fire, and a new gust of air stirs the ashes upward. You cough softly, eyes watering once more. You blink. The water doesn't help. It rarely does. You rise and step outside for fresh air. The night is cool, and the stars are blurred halos in a velvety sky. You squint at them anyway, trying to count. 1, 2, maybe 5. You stop. The darkness out here is a welcome relief. No candle, no fire, just soft, formless night. You sit on the edge of the wooden step and rub your temples again. You start to hum an old tune your mother used to sing while combing your hair. You hum until your jaw relaxes and your breath slows. Pain by now is a familiar roommate. You don't ask it to leave. You just live around it. From behind the hut, the sheep shuffle restlessly. One bleats in its sleep. You hear a faint rustle, maybe a fox. You don't bother checking. You wouldn't see anything useful in the dark anyway. You pull your cloak tighter and lean against the hut's outer wall. Your eyes are closed, but you still feel awake. Not alert, just aware. Like your body hasn't quite decided if it's ready for rest yet. Back inside, someone stirs. The door creaks open. It's your cousin holding a lump of soft bread wrapped in linen. Eat, she whispers. It'll help. You chew slowly, eyes still closed, grateful for the quiet gesture. The bread is stale, but comforting. Like most things in your life, you curl up by the hearth again this time, on the inside edge of the crooked mat. You listen to the fire's last few sighs as the embers settle into themselves. You blink once, twice, and the blur that is your world softens even more, less like distortion, more like calm. You are at last beginning to rest. The next day begins with an itch. Not in your eyes, though. Those still feel like they've been scrubbed with hay and seasoned with fireplace smoke, but a more general, all-body kind of irritation. Your blanket has bunched at your feet. There's straw in your shirt. And someone somewhere is grinding grain with the enthusiasm of a blacksmith forging a sword. You open your eyes reluctantly. The inside of the hut is a wash of low grey light and blurry outlines. Familiar shapes, the slanted stool, the crooked rack of drying herbs, the ceiling beam with the suspicious crack that everyone ignores. You sit up slowly, rubbing your face, and try to blink the fuzziness away. Nope. Still here. You grab your boots, which are both damp and somehow crunchy, and start your day. Outside, the sky is the colour of old linen, and the fields stretch out like a slightly melted painting. You can't make out the individual fence posts, but you know where they are by feel. You've tripped over enough of them to develop a sense. Today's task is thatching repairs. The roof's been leaking near the corner over the sleeping area, and unless someone wants an indoor pond, it's time to haul reeds and start patching. You join your uncle near the riverbank, where bundles of dried reeds lie stacked like forgotten instruments. He's already tying them into sheaves, hands working quickly. You kneel beside him and fumble through your own bundle. Everything is beige, everything is pointy. You try to sort the reeds by length, by texture, by whatever you can tell through blurry vision. Occasionally you poke yourself in the thumb, once in the cheek. He laughs. You'll learn, he says. You've been doing this for years. Historians still argue whether peasant labour was learned through formal instruction or just relentless trial and error. In your case, it's definitely the latter. You squint, cut bundle tie, and try not to stab your eye with a reed tip. Once the bundles are prepped, you climb onto the roof, which is a generous way of saying you shimmy up a wobbly ladder built by someone with more confidence than skill. Up top, the thatch smells of old water and warmer seasons. You feel for the soft spots, damp patches, where the reeds have collapsed in on themselves. You begin weaving in new bundles, fingers slipping reeds under and over, tucking and tightening. Your eyes sting from the effort, but this is work you can do by feel. Your hands remember the rhythm. Your body leans into the curve of the roof like it's hugging you back. Halfway through, the clouds break open and a light drizzle begins to fall. You blink rapidly, squinting into the rain, trying to finish the patch before everything gets soggy again. The droplets blur your vision further, turning the edge of the roof into a watercolour mess. And then slip. One boot catches. You lurch sideways, arms pinwheeling. For a second the world tilts and your stomach drops. But you catch yourself, barely. Your uncle watching from below grunts in approval. Good balance, he says. You don't respond. You're busy convincing your heart to slow down. Back inside, soaked through and smelling like swamp reeds, you dry off by the hearth. Your aunt hands you a cracked mug of something hot and green and probably healing. You don't ask what's in it. You sip, and your tongue goes slightly numb. You don't mind. Your eyes are red again. You look in the polished bronze shard near the hearth and see yourself reflected blurry, yes, but also deeply tired. And oddly calm. The afternoon is spent in smaller tasks, fixing a door latch, sorting dried beans by size, which, given your eyesight, is more like guessing and listening to a neighbour's story about a chicken that can predict the weather. You nod solemnly. The chicken is probably more accurate than most. Dinner arrives in the form of thick barley porridge and a fried egg shared between three of you. You marvel again at the miracle of warm food and familiar faces. Even in blur, the world is rich. After dinner, you help gather firewood, stepping carefully over the worn stone path. You can't see the edges, but your feet know the pattern. The rhythm of your life isn't visual, it's tactile audible, patterned in repetition. Historians sometimes wonder how peasants navigated a world without clear sight, without aids, without even the concept of vision correction. But you know, you navigate it by doing, by listening, by stumbling and remembering where you stumbled. Back inside, your cousin lights a single candle. You sit beside it and try to read one of the monastery scraps, just a bit of psalm inked on rough vellum. You can't read it, of course. But the shape of the letters is soothing. looping sharp, then round again. You trace one with your finger. It doesn't need to be clear to be beautiful. And as the fire dims and the last reed bundle dries near the door, you lie back on the woven mat vision as soft as your breath and drift into sleep once more, comforted by the blur and everything it teaches you to feel. You wake with the distinct feeling that your face has fused with your sleeping mat. It hasn't, of course, but your cheek has picked up the faint pattern of woven reeds, and your left eye refuses to open fully, like it's staging a quiet protest. You sit up, press your palms into your sockets, and blink at the smudgy shapes of the hut around you. There's a dull ache behind your eyes again, like someone trying to whittle a spoon inside your skull. You breathe in slowly, the air tinged with the usual aromas, wood smoke, damp wool, and a vague trace of goat. Comforting, in its own terrible way. Today is wash day, which means hauling linens, blankets, and the family's general assortment of smells like last week garments down to the stream. It's a communal effort, half chore, half gossip, half competition, over whose soap-root mixture actually works. That's 3 halves. That's what your brain feels like today. You pack up the laundry with your cousin and make the slow, squinty walk through the trees to the stream. Morning light filters through the leaves in streaks, creating a strobe effect of brightness and shade. You blink constantly, your eyes trying and failing to adjust to every new contrast. Once at the stream, you kneel on a flat rock and begin the process soak, scrub, rinse, repeat. The cold water numbs your fingers, and the white glare off the stream's surface doesn't help your headache. Still, the rhythmic swishing is soothing in a brain-off, arms-on kind of way. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers washed clothes regularly or simply aired them out and hoped for divine intervention. You're living proof that it's somewhere in between. Yes, you wash them, but mostly because unwashed clothes start developing opinions. The soap root you're using smells faintly of mustard and regret. You wring a shirt out water splattering your face. You blink rapidly and laugh. Your cousin mimics you with a splash, and suddenly it becomes a game. Who can get wetter without actually entering the stream? You win, but only because she slips and lands knee first in the mud. You try not to gloat, but the smirk escapes. As you hang the laundry on nearby branches to dry, the sunlight sharpens. It glints off the water in distracting flashes. You squint up at the sky and shade your eyes with one hand. Vision still blurry, world still too bright, but your head hurts a little less now. After lunch you return to the stream alone to fetch the dry linens. A breeze has knocked some of them down, and you fumble through the leaves trying to tell shirt from shrub. You guess, correctly most of the time. On the walk back you think about sight again, about how even in your blurred world there's texture. You know where you are by the shape of the stones underfoot, by the distance between trees, by the sound of the wind nudging branches. You know your place without having to see it clearly. Still, part of you wonders if someone handed you a pair of lenses tomorrow, sharp and miraculous, would it change how you see your life? Or would the same goat still chew your bootlaces, just with sharper definition? You get home and fold the linens badly. Your aunt fixes your folds without a word. You're not offended. You can't tell if the corners are even anyway. The rest of the day is quiet. You're tasked with shelling peas, which you do by touch, letting the pods pop between your fingers, while the rest of the family chatters around the hearth. Your cousin reads something out loud, slowly, carefully, from one of the few precious scraps of writing in the hut. You close your eyes and listen, the words painting a clearer picture in your head than your eyes ever could. Later, Elfrida stops by with another balm, this one made from elderflower and lamb's ear, stored in a cracked ceramic jar. She applies it gently around your eyes, the coolness tingling slightly. You thank her, and she grunts approval. That's high praise. As the sky darkens and the evening meal simmers in the pot, you stand outside the hut, looking out at your blurred kingdom. You can make out the outline of the distant hills, the shimmer of the stream in the distance, the haze of chimney smoke curling from roofs like lazy thoughts. You can't see the stars clearly tonight, but you know they're there, and that's enough. You wake before the rooster, not because you want to, but because your back aches. Your shoulder feels like it's been replaced with a damp loaf of rye, and your eyes refuse to cooperate with the concept of morning. The hut is still dark, save for the faint grey suggestion of dawn seeping in through the window slits. You sit up slowly, every joint offering its usual protest in crackles and muted curses. Your breath fogs in the air as you pull on yesterday's shirt. Somewhere behind you, someone is already stoking the hearth. You hear the familiar cough of a smouldering fire being bullied into life. Today is one of those strange, in-between days. No urgent chore, no looming crisis, just the usual helping your cousin dye cloth gathering eggs and avoiding the patch of floor near the hearth that always squeaks like a betrayed floorboard. The dyeing starts early. You and your cousin lug the pot out to the yard and build a small fire beneath it, watching the water come to a lazy boil while she tosses in handfuls of woad. The dye turns the water a strange murky green before it blooms into that deep, soft blue you've come to love, one of the few colours you can recognise even with your limited sight. You help stir with a wooden paddle, careful not to splash. The steam curls up and fogs your face, and for once your blurry vision feels almost right in the dreamy haze. You're working in a cloud, and somehow that makes sense. Your cousin chats idly about the priest donkey who apparently escaped again and was found halfway into the flower shed. You laugh. You don't need to see the donkey's flour-dusted expression to find the image hilarious. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants found joy in their routines or merely endured them. But here today, standing in the crisp air beside a vat of bubbling colour, you feel something like contentment. Or at least the version of it that fits into a morning that started with joint pain and lukewarm porridge. After dyeing, you fetch water from the well. The bucket is heavy, and the rope keeps catching, but you manage. Your hands are cold and wet, but they know what to do. Your feet remember every stone along the path. You could almost do this blind. Later in the day, your aunt sends you out to the storage shed to fetch onions. It's dim inside, and your eyes struggle. You step carefully, relying more on smell than sight. The onions are in a basket near the back unless your cousin moved them again. She has a habit of rearranging everything and calling it tidying. You squint. There they are. Round, knobby, fragrant. You grab 3 and make your way out, stubbing your toe on a misplaced stool. You bite your lip and mutter under your breath. Again. Evening approaches slowly. The light takes its time, slipping away, lingering in long golden fingers across the floorboards. You help repair a lantern near the doorway, its glass cracked, its oil leaking slightly. You clean the wick polish, the soot, off the glass and hold it up. You can't see your reflection clearly. Just a soft outline, a vague shape with tired eyes and calloused hands. You light the lantern anyway. After supper, your uncle brings out a small bowl of honey and dried herbs. For sleep, he says, though you're not sure if it's for your head or his. You both take a spoonful and sit in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle, and the night stretch its arms across the village. Then, as if called by ritual, you step outside. The air is cool but not biting. The sky is dark now, but not empty. You can't see the stars sharply, but you know where they are. Their positions are burned into your memory. Their names whispered by older villagers. Their stories tucked into your brain like warm blankets. You close your eyes and listen. The night sounds like frogs near the stream wind in the dry reeds and a dog barking somewhere far away. The hut behind you glows with the faintest orange pulse of firelight. Your world, though, blurred, is known, felt, memorized. You open your eyes and the dark is not as dark as it once was. You step back inside, ducking slightly at the low doorway, and curl onto your mat. Your joints crack again, and your cousin snorts from the corner. You sound like an old gate, she mutters. I feel like one, you reply. You close your eyes, and somewhere between the pop of the hearth and the sigh of the wind outside, your breath slows. You may not see clearly, but you belong here, and for tonight that's all you need. The morning doesn't so much arrive as slowly tap on the back of your skull until you give up on sleep. Your eyes open reluctantly. One lid sticks slightly, and your vision is even worse than usual. Everything is fuzzy, smudged, dreamlike. It takes you several seconds to remember where you are, which is always both unsettling and strangely cozy. The mat is still warm. The fire has burned down to a quiet shimmer. You sit up, stretch, and feel your knees snap like dry twigs. Across the hut, the children are already awake, muttering to each other and poking at the ashes. One of them stirs the coals with the handle of a spoon, which earns a sharp reprimand from your aunt. We eat with that. The daily rhythm begins again. Porridge bubbles. Boots are pulled on. Someone outside curses at a stubborn goat. Today you're helping your neighbour gather mushrooms from the shady edge of the woods, delicate work that requires some familiarity with blurred shapes and soft textures. You don't trust your eyes for identification, but your hands know the difference between edible caps and certain death. You walk slowly along the forest edge, bending every few steps, fingers brushing through damp leaves and loamy soil. The forest smells rich and musty like wet wool and buried secrets. You find 2 mushrooms that your neighbour nods at approvingly, and one that she slaps out of your hand with a horrified noise. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had detailed botanical knowledge or relied on trial and error over generations. Judging by your neighbour's reflexes, it's clearly both. She hands you a different cap and says, "This one's safe. Tastes like sadness, though." You laugh. It does. You'll eat it anyway. As you work, she mentions her husband's aching back. He's nearly 40 and walks like he's carrying a church pew on his shoulders. He swears he sees double now, she adds, but I think he's just trying to get out of chores. You understand. As your own eyes worsen, the world becomes a blur of excuses and adjustments. You no longer try to read markings or carve small details. You leave that to the children, whose eyes are still young and sharp. For now, later you help weave baskets more by feel than sight. Your fingers remember the dance of bending reeds and firm pressure. Your eyes can't help you much. They haven't for a while. Your niece sits beside you threading thin willow branches into tight spirals, tongue poking out in concentration. She doesn't notice you're squinting your slowed pace. She just hands you more reeds when you need them. You think about how different life must be for children born with poor eyesight. No glasses, no diagnosis. Just a childhood of lean closer. And don't sit so far away. You wonder how many children simply got labelled as slow or clumsy, when really they just couldn't see the world clearly. You certainly remember what it felt like. The blurred lessons, the mistaken gestures, the way your mother used to guide your hand to the right tools because you'd picked up the wrong one again. And as the years passed, no one expected it to get better. They just expected you to get better at working around it. You did. Now you teach the same quiet strategies, walk the field, edge by foot, memory, not sight. Count steps to the gate. Smell the herbs, don't try to identify them by leaf. Your niece asks if you've ever seen a shooting star. You pause. I've seen something, you say. Could have been a star. Could have been a spark from the forge. She giggles. That night, as the stars push their way through the dusk haze, you sit outside the girl beside you, both of you wrapped in one scratchy blanket. She points upward. That one's Vega, she says confidently. You squint. It's a bright blob. You nod anyway. Do you remember the stories she asks? You do. The ones about the star-crossed lovers, or the great bear in the sky, or the warrior who could see every star with his eagle eyes. You tell the stories slowly, each one soft-edged and warm in your throat. She listens. She believes every word. You're glad she can still see them. But you've learned that even when vision dims, stories stay sharp. And sometimes that's all the clarity you need. The rain begins before sunrise. Not a downpour, not a storm, just that persistent drizzle that turns everything to mud and makes you question your life choices, especially the ones involving wool and outdoor tasks. You wake to the sound of dripping, rhythmic and rude tapping on the thatched roof above like a bored neighbour knocking with one knuckle. The hut is dark. You roll over and immediately regret it. Your hip complains, your neck protests, and your left shoulder feels like someone stuffed a small log beneath your skin. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, though it doesn't help. Everything's still a blur. The floor is damp in places. You shuffle over it with your toes, trying to avoid the coldest patches. Someone mutters from under a blanket. Someone else sneezes. A creaky door opens, letting in the smell of wet sheep and something distressingly fungal. Today is firewood hauling day. You sigh. The forest trail is slick, of course, and the fog makes the trees look like they're made of damp smudges and suspicion. You and your cousin walk single file, pulling a rickety handcart behind you that squeals like a choir of angry mice. The wheels stick in the mud. Your cousin swears. You blink rain out of your eyes and try to remember why this counts as a normal day. The wood you gather is wet, heavy and vaguely mossy. Every log you lift feels like it's judging you. Your hands slip. Once you drop a whole bundle into a puddle, then briefly consider just leaving it there and telling your aunt the forest refused to share. You don't. You pick it up. Because that's life. Historians still argue whether peasant daily labour was more dangerous in wet conditions or simply more miserable. Today, it's clearly both. Back in the village, you stop by the forge to deliver a few chunks of dry bark. The blacksmith, a mountain of a man, with the posture of a bent horseshoe, grunts at you and gestures toward his apprentice, who is once again nursing a fresh burn and looking slightly panicked. You squat beside the boy and inspect his arm. The burn is red puffy and smells faintly of overcooked onion. You reach for your little pouch of salve, beeswax, elderflower, and whatever that minty herb was. You apply it gently while he bites his lip and pretends he's not crying. You'll live, you whisper. He nods. Does it help? Maybe, you say. Mostly smells nice. You leave the forge and return home to find your cousin trying to dry reeds indoors again, which the goat is interpreting as an open buffet. You shoo it off with a broom. It glares at you deeply offended, as only goats can be. By early evening, your back is in full rebellion, and your head is ringing like a cracked bell. You rub your temples in slow circles, which does nothing, but the routine helps. You apply another layer of balm. You chew on a strip of willow bark. You lie down near the hearth, and just breathe. Someone suggests a story. You don't object. Your uncle tells one about a man who fell off a wagon, hit his head, and started seeing angels everywhere. He tried to marry a church bell. You laugh despite the ache. Your aunt follows with a tale about a peasant who got hit by lightning and invented a new way to scare crows by screaming at them in Latin. Historians say it probably didn't work, she adds solemnly. But the crows were very confused. As the hut quiets, the rain continues. You step outside one more time before bed, pulling your cloak tight around your shoulders. The night is wet, but peaceful. The paths are puddled and gleaming. The sky is hidden, but the wind smells clean. You stand in the dark, eyes open, seeing nothing clearly. But you know where everything is. The tree stump to your left, the crooked fence post, the hollow log where the toads live. You don't need perfect vision to belong here. You step back inside one hand, brushing the doorframe as you pass, and you let the evening carry you gently toward rest, every ache a familiar lullaby. The final morning of our little journey greets you with silence. No goats bleating, no pots clanging, no frantic cousin chasing after runaway hens. Just a hushed, sleepy quiet that makes you wonder if perhaps the entire village collectively overslept. You sit up slowly, savouring the rare stillness. Even the light filtering through the shutter slat seems reluctant to wake you too quickly, soft grey and a little uncertain. Your body aches, yes, but it's a familiar ache, worn like an old boot. Your eyes resist opening fully, of course. Your vision remains its usual blur, but it all feels manageable today. You dress not because anyone told you to, but because the rhythm of living insists on it. The tunic is scratchy. The belt never stays knotted. You blink at your boots and put them on anyway. There's a hole in the left one. You'll ignore it again. You help start the fire, carefully, deliberately, adding kindling in soft bundles, coaxing the smoke until the flame licks up through the pile. The warmth spreads slowly, and with it, the scent of ash and comfort. You rub your hands together and glance around the room. No one is speaking yet. It's one of those rare mornings where the fire gets to speak first. Breakfast is leftover stew, and a hunk of bread that could be used as a weapon in less peaceful times. You soften it with stew chew slowly and take the moment for what it is, unremarkable and therefore precious. Later in the morning, you're sent to the garden not to dig or plant or even gather, but simply to check. The ground is damp but not soaked. The cabbages look like they're winning against the bugs for once. The scarecrow is still standing barely. You bend down to brush your fingers through the mint patch. It releases a sharp, sleepy scent. You smile, not because anything is especially funny, but because you're here, breathing, seeing the world in your own way. Historians often romanticize the peasant's connection to nature, but in your case it's less spiritual and more practical. You know which weeds choke roots. You know which plants sting when you pull them. And you definitely know which ones are only green, because the dog peed there. As the sun climbs higher, your tasks settle into smaller movements, repairing a woven basket, reshaping a broom, helping a neighbour untangle a length of rope that somehow knotted itself into a philosophical paradox. In the afternoon, you do something rare, you rest. You sit beneath the oak near the edge of the village and simply exist. The bark at your back is rough but grounding. The wind rustles gently through the leaves, and for a while you let your eyes close completely. No squinting, no focusing, just soft darkness. The world doesn't need to be sharp to be beautiful. Eventually someone finds you, not because they need help, just because they want to sit too. You share the shade and pass a half-full water flask back and forth in silence. This is what passes for a holiday. And honestly, it's not bad. Evening returns as it always does, with the soft grumble of soup, the flurry of finding where someone hid the last of the herbs, and the endless low-stakes debate about whose turn it is to clean the hearth. After supper, the candle is lit. The fire is coaxed back to life. The air smells of thyme and old wood. You lie on your mat and exhale slowly. Your niece nestles beside you, holding a piece of scrap linen with a few practice stitches. "I messed up again," she whispers. You smile. It still holds together, doesn't it? She nods. Then it's good. She hums softly as she sews. You close your eyes. Your vision has never been sharp. Your body has always ached. Pain is part of your story. But it's not the whole story. There's warmth. There's laughter. There's motion and memory and routine. There's you. Still here. Still seeing, just not the way others do. And tonight, as your breath slows and your limbs grow heavy, the fire glows quietly at your feet. You are safe. You are seen. You can rest now. Let your breath settle now. Feel the weight of your body resting into the earth, as if the fields you've walked and the soil you've touched are welcoming you back. Warm, slow, steady. There's no need to squint anymore. No reeds to weave. No aching shoulders to carry anything further tonight. The world can stay soft and blurry for a little while longer. It's safe here. In this gentle hush, you can forget the foggy mornings, the cold buckets of water, the sting of smoke in your eyes. Let them drift like leaves down a quiet stream, still present, but floating further away with each breath. Your body has worked, and it has earned this pause. Your hands have shaped the day. Your steps, even if unsure, have carried you across a life rich in rhythm and resilience. You have found your way not with perfect clarity, but with patience, familiarity, and 1,000 little acts of kindness and effort. The hearth glows dimly now. The wind outside hums a lullaby through the wooden slats. Someone has already banked the fire. Someone has already drawn the curtain. All that's left is the stillness. Let your muscles unwind. Let your thoughts grow soft. There's nothing more to do. You can sleep now. You are home.